I met a gypsy.
You good?
You hear yourself all good?
I can hear myself.
Perfect. Were you on, Ronesy?
Yeah, we're on.
Jeff Leisk, welcome to Gypsy Tales, mate. I've been very excited for this one. I explained it to people before, because some people, I get messages like, why haven't you got this person on? Why haven't you got this person? All right, there's been a bunch of people that have been on the list since day one of starting this podcast. Jeff Leisk is one of them. Appreciate it.
But I bet no one's really asked to get me on this show.
No, you would be. That's why I'm saying it, because so many people are like, why haven't you had Jeff Leisk on it? Like, especially when I had Gawley on. Everyone's like, well, where's Leisky? I'm like, look, everybody's got schedules, everybody's busy, but just letting the people know this one has been on the bucket list since day one. I'm stoked you're here.
No, cool. I mean, it's always fun to one of the things when I sort of stepped back from KTM in March last year was to kind of, life's been such a blur, for the last at least 25 years that I was involved with KTM, and you kind of, in some ways, you kind of forget a little bit about what's my backstory, what have I actually done, and sort of one of the things I wanted to do was kind of try to go back a little bit and look at the things that I've done, and I know that sounds a bit crazy, but it's kind of cool just to kind of step back in time a little bit and touch on the things that you did and kind of led to where I am now.
Well, the funny thing with that is it sounds crazy, right? But I know you from like thick of KTM days when you were the boss there, and that brand wasn't what it is now. So you know what I mean? There was a lot of time where you were at KTM where it was up and coming. There was no Supercross champions. There was no motocross. You were in that wave, and there's not much point when you're really in the thick of trying to make shit happen to stop and be like, oh, wow, how great is, you've really, it's a very pressing, you're on the ball, constantly moving. So I know exactly what you mean. It's not, there's sort of not much point to look back while you're in the thick of what, the things that you've got going on.
Absolutely, you're always looking for a better day, and when we first got involved with KTM, exactly what you said, there were no Supercross championships, there were barely any motocross championships, at least here in Australia at that time. There'd been some success, absolutely, there'd been some people that carried the brand pretty well, but, there was a lot of work to be done, and some tough times there. The product was a bit rough in those early days, and we're trying to break new ground. We're trying to get the bike to do things that it wasn't really designed to do. It sort of had a really strong enduro heritage, and we got Craig Anderson on board early on, and we had this bike, and we wanted to go race Supercross here in Australia. They weren't really doing much in the States at all with it, and we're trying to figure out how to get this bike to go around a Supercross track, and we were sort of breaking new ground, trying to figure all that out, and it was just head down.
I think Sammy brought this up to me the other day. I think it was because Ando was doing the whole Manjimup thing, and we started talking about how sick it was that Ando's going there. And I think Sammy said to me that Craig Anderson was probably one of the first dudes to ever win a Supercross race on a KTM, or like one of the first Supercross like championship guys. Would that be true, you reckon?
Yeah, 100%.
That's insane, eh?
Yeah, it really was. He's an incredible talent, absolutely. And deep down, he's a pretty determined sucker too. I think we actually complemented each other pretty well. And when I say that, I don't think we actually got on great all the time, because sometimes it's not a matter of agreeing with everything, and it was up to me to call out times where I didn't think he was trying hard enough, working hard enough, and there were times he called us out and said, well, the bike's shit and this and that, and it's and that's when you get that tension. That's what drives you forward. But yeah, with the bike, like it had this enduro crankshaft, and you'd hit a double or tabletop, and you wanted the front end to come down, and the big heavy crank would keep spinning and the front would go like this, you know.
Really?
So we worked out that, you know, we had to kind of get some weight out of the engine rotation, and we figured that out and got some lighter cranks, and, you know, then you'd turn the throttle off and the front would go down on
Really?
yeah. So, you know, they're the things we had to kind of play around with, you know, where our competitors like, you know, Craig Dack with CDR, and he had Hogan and a few guys, and, you know, they were already kind of, you know, had all that dialed in and figured out. So we were trying to figure all that out, but, you know, we got there, you know, and I think we got there through a lot of hard work, and, you know, I was still pretty active at the time. I was still doing a bit of riding, and, you know, I'd go meet Ando down at Redhead Beach down there south of Newcastle, and we'd run in the sand dunes, and, you know, we'd hammer ourselves, you know, and we came out for the first Supercross there at Newcastle early in the year, and we came out swinging, and I think we surprised a few people, you know. We were right up front and getting the job done.
Man, that's a cool era, and I didn't think about the fact. So who else was racing Supercross on a KTM at this time? Like, what year are we talking?
Yeah, like that was so, you know, we sort of got going with our race team with KTM. You know, I rode the bike, you know, the Thumpers a few times there in around 93, 94.
Yeah.
So, you know, probably the era was, you know, 95, 96, you know, that's kind of when we got started with Supercross, probably even 95 there on you know, the product was still actually, you know, had a white base color, and I think in 96 they switched to the kind of an odd orange color, and on from there. So that's the time.
And was there Supercross dudes racing KTMs in America at that time?
It wasn't a lot. I think a guy called Mike Fisher was doing a little bit then, but not a lot going on.
So there wasn't like a factory effort.
Not per se. No, not much going on. You know, I mean, you know, obviously they progressed, and I think they got a team running over there, and I think Kurt Nickel was, I think even Salvarage was a bit involved early on. Kurt Nickel came in, but I don't think things really got turned around until Roger came on board, and, you know, and he made a huge difference, not only in terms of a team, but, you know, Rogers. I think it was funny because I was out riding yesterday, and we're kind of looking at the evolution of the older Hondas, you know, and you know, I've got an 85 500, and then you look at the 85 versus the 89. It's such a big change, and really that change was when Roger DeCosta got, you know, really involved with Honda, and the same with KTM, because people think Roger's a great team manager, this and that, but what people don't realise is that he's massive when it comes to developing the bike, you know, and his influence over the engineers, be it Honda, be it KTM. You know, he's the guy that made all the changes. So what we found here in Australia, particularly when it came to Supercross, is that, you know, when Roger finally got on board, that's when things really ramped up. So before then, you know, we were kind of like making it up as we went along, you know, as local guys, using the best possible knowledge that we had here to try and figure out what to do.
So did you have much contact with Matagoffin in terms of, like, you guys saying, hey, we need this different crank, like, can you help us out with a crank? Were you guys in contact with KTM at that point, or were you kind of like just this rogue distributor of KTM, you know?
No, we always had contact, and, you know, one thing we always made sure of, if we went to Mattighofen, we'd always go down into R&D or the race departments. It wasn't really even a race department back then. There was R&D, and we did have good relationships with the people, and, you know, I'd go in there, and you know, someone from R&D would pull out a crankshaft from under his bench and go, hey, I think this one's going to work, you know, and I'd put it in my bag and take it back. So yeah, we were talking to each other, but, you know, they didn't really know, you know, didn't really know Supercross, and didn't really know what the requirements were, but I was just saying, hey, I think I need this because that's going to help. So yeah, you know, we always had a good relationship, and a bit of an open book thing where we'd talk to the engineers, and, you know, and that was the thing in the early days. You know, it didn't really matter what it was. You know, we were talking a lot about what could we do, what could make the bikes better, and that went across, you know, motocross, enduro, and it didn't really matter what it was. You know, it was a bit like electric start. You know, then they had it on the 4-stroke. And there was a big question, are we going to put it on a 2-stroke? And my take on that was, particularly with the enduro, was like, well, you don't go and crank start your car, do you? You know what I mean? No one walks out these days with the crank handle on. So I said, why not? You know, everyone wants to just push a button, you know, and start these bikes. So
it's crazy now looking back to that even being a question.
Yeah, now it is. You know, it was
Yeah.
funny. You know, our riding yesterday, and one of the young guys, you know, he's trying to kickstart this CR500 that I got because, you know, some of these young people that
I've never kicked a bike.
Man, they don't even know what a Kickstarter is anymore. You know what I mean? Like they don't know how to start a CR500. You know, like, you know, how do you do that?
Yeah, well, it's funny. So I was watching the Manjimup Motocross of Nations last night, and then this morning I got up and I started watching some, like, I just typed Jeff Leisk in YouTube. I was trying to watch some of the old GP races, and there's guys on the start line just kicking the fuck out of these things. And it's like these professional dudes, best in the world, and they're like 4 dudes standing around their bike trying to make sure that they get this thing started. And it's just like, wow, we don't live in that time. Like, if you, I mean, Suzuki, I guess, but like, if you saw that now, like Cooper Webb struggling to kickstart a bike, you'd be like, what are they doing over there?
100%. You know, that, like, even before your race, you're just kind of like hoping that you could nail the kick first time, so you didn't use up any extra energy before a 40-minute moto. You know what I mean? So, or if you crashed during the race, you know, that was a big factor. You know, shit, I got to kickstart this bike again, and you know, that'd take the wind out of you, and then you got to recompose yourself. You know, during the race. So it's it's something we don't think about now, and thank God, really, it's pretty cool being able to just hit the button. So.
Oh man, yeah, I remember races even as like when I first sort of turned senior and started getting on 4-strokes. I think the first 4-stroke I had was like an 04 CRF 250. And I remember there was motos where it was muddy and I was like, just don't drop your bike, don't drop. Wasn't even thinking about racing. All I was thinking about was not dropping my bike because I probably wouldn't be able to start it.
Yeah, just
once it stopped.
Well, just keeping the engine lit. You know, I remember like turning the idle up a little bit more just on a wet day or something.
Yeah,
just
true.
A little bit of an insurance policy. So, yeah.
Oh man, it's come a long way, dude. And especially now, like when you look from the perspective of where KTM is, so dominant, ready to race. You know, they've just, over the last, 30 plus years, it's just slowly streamlined to the pinnacle of our particular sport in terms of off-road. You'd have to say KTM's probably, they're the brand that's doing it the best, but that's a lot of work to get to that apex of the sport because they were so far behind 30 years ago.
Totally, they really were. And you look at the packaging of the bike, you know, the way all the elements of the bike kind of packaged into the frame and all these details, and it was so rough, you know, back in the mid 90s, and then you look at the way the product's packaged now, you know, where everything fits in, and not only like is it packaged in nice, but it's also easy to work on. You know, that's one of the key benefits that they've really come up with. And, you know, people say, you know, we're looking at one of the bikes yesterday, you know, one of the latest bikes, 21 models, and people say, you know, how can they make them better? But they will, you know, because they have to. You know, so, and also, you know, just technology in other areas keeps advancing, you know, whether it's metallurgy or whether it's electronics. Or,
yeah, true.
And then really we've got this other thing coming down the pipeline, you know, as far as the combustion engine, you know, that's the auto industry's obviously, you know, moving along with that really quickly in terms of which way it's going to go, whether it's going to be electric or you know, the hydrogen power, whatever it's going to be, and you know, then sports like Formula One and then, you know, they're really having to think about what's the future look like for them, you know, and then, you know, what's going to happen in the motorcycle space, you know, is the combustion engine going to keep rolling there, or what's it going to be? So, you know, I'm sure it's going to be around for quite a while longer, but yeah, there's changes imminent because if you look at you know, the kids' balance bikes with the Stay Sick,
yeah,
then you look at what, you know, the KTM Electric Mini,
yeah,
and then what's going to happen after that, you know? So there's a generation of kids now getting on these little electric balance bikes and little electric bicycles and things. You know, they're growing up now with a different idea of what two-wheel propulsion is. Yeah. So, you know, yeah, it's all changing. Yeah.
And in the same way, like you said, there's kids that have never used a Kickstarter.
Yeah,
there's going to be kids that have never rode a gas-powered bike.
I'm thinking that, you know, yeah, absolutely.
It'll be interesting though, like what you do with the sound, because the sound at an event is probably the thing that really gets you into it. You know, like those Formula E races and stuff like that, they're cool to watch on TV, but there's something weird about the no sound and then there's probably something even weirder about fake sound. So I don't know what you do there.
Yeah, and I think motorsport's got a big decision coming up there because it's the sound, right? It's the sound and the sound waves. Those sound waves kind of hit you in the chest, and they kind of do something to you. And then you watch the speed and so on. So yeah, motorsport's got to figure that one out. Because we were talking before, about motorsport's got to be entertainment. It's a show, right? It's Supercross, it's just Formula One, V8s, whatever it's going to be. It's a show and it's entertainment. And if there's no noise, if there's no sound waves firing out at you, I'm not sure if that's going to be entertainment.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, though, so let's use a property like Trent's, for example, right? Yeah. So you've got this beautiful grass field, this beautiful area to ride. He's lucky enough that there's no houses really around there to where the sound isn't a problem. So we have this great track we can ride. Slowly, things start to get built in and built up. And then the problem that dirt bikes has faced since like the 70s, like even when we were kids, man, like we used to be able to get on our bikes in our house and we used to like ride through the cane paddocks and we'd cruise around. No one really cared. Like there was quite a lot of space for us to go and do that. But nowadays, that is becoming this huge barrier to entry for our sport. Is like there's Reedy Creek, that's gone. That was a iconic venue here on the Gold Coast, and all these little clubs and tracks around the country. They were sort of on the fringe of town, 15, 20 minutes out of town. Would have been a long way to drive back in the, in the 70s or the 80s. But nowadays, it's like it's got to be hours and hours away because everything's getting so built up. So the electric thing means that if you've got a block of land, a few acres in close to town and everyone's on electric bikes, then have at it, boys. Like what would be, the barrier to entry, because you are getting rid of essentially a problem that stops people riding bikes. So on the event front, it's probably going to be a bit weird because there's no noise. But on the punter front, the no noise could completely revolutionize the sport.
100%. The elephant in the room's the noise. That's the problem because of urban sprawl. And really suburbia always growing, moving closer. I can think of 100 tracks that are closed because of urban sprawl, and it's because of the noise, right? That's because we can control the dust generally. We can put some water on that and we can fix the dust problem, but we can't fix the noise problem. So yeah, absolutely. That's an upside of this hopefully new generation. They haven't really quite figured it out for bikes, for the bigger bikes yet, in terms of getting the right range and so on, but that can be resolved in time.
So let's go back to the start for you, because you're a guy that has made your entire life, has been, I guess, lived through the motorcycle. Like it created your first profession of racing as a professional motocross racer. Then you've transitioned into KTM, and then essentially retired. You've recently retired from that role, and now you're still riding bikes and you're going to go to manage them up. And so, your whole life has kind of been lived through this passion. Where did that start from day one?
It started with my father, Bob. He was a speedway rider and at Claremont Speedway. So, on the Joa 500s. I mean, earlier that was like they were called JAP 500s. So turning left, sliding. That was his passion, he's probably the most passionate motorcyclist I ever knew. He just loved it, and unfortunately he passed away recently, and I did his eulogy for the family, and I guess in that process, you do a lot of research and you try and understand someone's life, what drove them, what were their passions. And my dad was pretty one-dimensional, because every time I looked into his life and I tried to find something other than motorcycles, I couldn't find it. His whole life revolved around his riding, and then our riding. My older brother Mark was a racer too, 2 years older than me. it was just all about motorcycles, and I guess we were kind of at the forefront of mini-cycle racing in Australia, you know, when it first kind of evolved and they started to organise actual racing for kids, you know.
Yeah,
I was right at that forefront, probably around 73 or something like that, and I can clearly remember, you know, my brother, myself, and even my older sister going to some of the first organised mini cycle races in Perth, Western Australia. You know, one was held at Forestfield Speedway. That's no longer there. That's another victim of noise. Of noise. But yeah, we were absolutely at the forefront. You know, I think I had a Yamaha 60. My brother was on an XR 75, and yeah, I mean that just took over our lives. You know, we just, that was it. It was every weekend we're racing, riding, and I think we went to the first Australian Junior Motocross Championship at Pakenham, Victoria in 74.
Was that the first one?
The first one ever in Australia in 74, Pakenham, Victoria. I was on an XR 75, my brother was, and you know, I still remember it pretty clear because we went, you know, we just little kids, you know, like 8, 9 years old. Flew to Melbourne. Dad flew our bikes over there.
Really?
Yep. And then I remember we went to some shop it might have been Peter Stevens or something in Elizabeth Street, and we got these new boots, you know, and Dad said, you know, hey man, you got to break those boots in before you race. So we put these boots on in the shop.
And just kept them
we're
on.
walking around Melbourne with these, you know, these boots on, trying to break them in before the race, and it was just a blur, you know. We were racing, and I don't even know how I did it. I won the title, you know, I won the Australian title for my category, and yeah, that was it. You know, we were right there at the start of it all.
So, what role does Perth play in all this? Because we're obviously about to do this Manjimup trip. We're about to drive to WA, and I don't know. There's a part of me that is like, I guess, over-romanticizing. Maybe not over-romanticizing, but I'm romanticizing the West in a way, because to me, there is a big disconnect between the East and the West in Australia. And a lot of times it feels like the West is like a different country to us. You know, I don't spend that much time there. I've been to Perth a few times, but it's not like a part of my world in a way. You know, it feels so distant from me. And this trip to Manji, for me, is like trying to bridge that gap of, you know, and feel like this is this one big country that we're all kind of a part of. But there's something, and I think from me growing up in Cairns, like we were fairly isolated, you know, from down south. But West is even on a greater degree than that. So how much of, I guess the influence of just Perth and being so isolated and almost like being a little world to your own over there, like how much did that play into the love of bikes and then the way that you guys ended up dedicating your life to racing?
Yeah, it's well, you know, it's become evident, hasn't it? You know, it's always been that way. Like, you know, during COVID, where, you know, I think the people in WA be quite happy to be another country. You know, they, you know, like, and if you go back to Federation in Australia, you know, it was pretty tough to get Western Australia to come on board and be a part of the you know, the Federation of Australia. You know, the people over there, they, you know, it's so isolated, and they refer to people on the East Coast as the wise men from the East. You know, it's like, oh, those wise men from the East are going to show us how to do it. You know, well, we're better than them. You know, like they can't tell us how to do it. You know, so that's the attitude, and I'm pretty sure you'll get struck with that when you go over for Manji. Look, we were just living our own world there. You know, like we looked up to what happened on the East Coast. You know, we always heard about, wow, you know, they've got this racing over there. And as you know, back then, I mean, how did you get the information for a start? I mean, you know, so there was a couple of magazines. You might have read the Revs magazine or something, and you got a little bit of information about, you know, what was going on over there, or you might have heard it secondhand from somebody. But, you know, it was always like, wow, you know, on the East Coast, you know, that's where it happens. And, you know, they're the big guns. And every now and then you might see a few come over and race, you know, on the West Coast, and that was just incredible when you saw that. But, you know, we had a really vibrant, strong scene there in the West, you know, and because there were a lot of places to ride. I mean, like you said, in
Yeah.
Cairns, we had a lot of places. I could remember just virtually right at my front door, even though we lived in suburbia, we had places to ride. I suppose the big difference there, everything was sandy, generally speaking. We had a couple of hard packed tracks in the hills, but anything kind of on the coastline where we rode a lot was mega sandy, but we didn't know any better. We just thought that was normal. We just thought, well, riding in sand's just a normal deal. That's what we always had to ride on. So, but we had a super good scene, and it was easy to go riding. It was a social scene, and everyone had a lot of fun, and it was super cool. It was.
I think it's interesting the sand element of it, because you look at, for example, Jeffrey Hurling's, like, you've spent a lot of time in Europe. It's the same deal. There's just a lot of sand over there, and the guys that do well in the sand seem to be able to do well on anything. It's like that's the most extreme version of doing, like, if you're doing motos on a sand track, that's the most extreme version of doing motos. And if you grow up and that's all you know, I mean, Jeffrey Hurlings, you've got a bunch of guys that fit that description. And then you look at, the crop that's coming out of WA at the moment, like Regan Duffy, Kyle Webster. There's some dudes that, you spend your life riding sand and you're just a good rider by proxy.
Well, you certainly don't sit down a lot, do you?
No.
So one key element you'll notice, pretty much all those riders, they stand up a lot, and it really gives you good balance, trying to control the bike, and particularly the front end, kind of learning how to balance the front to rear of the bike, and obviously, trying to position yourself on the bike and how you modulate the throttle and everything, so the front end doesn't bury in the sand, and obviously, gives you a lot of strength. Of course, you're on the pegs the whole time, so it's certainly a real different type of riding, different style, but it's really challenging to master. But when you do master it, it's a real, it's a great feeling. It really feels cool, and you can kind of just float around a sand track. That's it's quite a buzz. Absolutely.
It feels where I feel like when you get sand right, it's almost got a surfing vibe to it.
Yeah, I think so. I think. I always relate riding bikes, particularly dirt bikes, of course, to like surfing, because the conditions, like a surfer's always looking for certain conditions, the wind, the swell, the wave. And as a dirt bike rider, we're also looking for the conditions, like we're looking for how much moisture is on the track, what's the track prep, so we're kind of like surfers, because we're sometimes overnight, and you go on a certain track and it's rained overnight just the right amount, and you're thinking to yourself, man, it's gonna be good, and that's the cool part about dirt. I've always gravitated to kind of dirt racing, because that's why I got into sprint car racing, because I like dirt. I like the way that it changes. I like that in the space of one race it can change completely, and you've got to constantly read the terrain and what's going on, and so it's just something that's, no matter how many times you go and do it, it's different. And it challenges you, and you're always looking to have the perfect ride or do that in the perfect way, but you're never going to be able to do it, but you're always trying to do it.
No, I totally agree. We went to Kyogle the other week. They got the big sand track out there, and it was exactly what you just said. So we got up in the morning and we started driving, and it was a bluebird day, like nice wintry sort of morning, not super cold, not one cloud in the sky, but the road was wet, like the bitumen on the way to the track. And I'm like, when you're riding a sand track and it's a blue sky day and the road on the way to the track is wet from rain in the morning, you're in for a good day. It's just those little tiny conditions. And when we shot Dream Ride in Hawaii, the video that we did with JDR, it was funny. So there was a bunch of surfers that they got into riding. And they were like, bro, it's always 6 foot and offshore at the dirt bike track. And I was like, you haven't been riding long enough, because it's not always 6 foot and offshore. Sometimes it's onshore, it's 2 foot, it's choppy and shit. And riding isn't fun. I was like, you will learn the more that you ride that there are days that are 6 foot and offshore, and they're so rare. And when you get those days, you just put as much fuel as you can in your bike.
100%, you know, and obviously that's, you know, it's you know, it's like when you're riding outdoors, you know, motocross. You know, I know a lot of the tracks, maybe, you know, the Supercross professionals, every time they get on a track to train and practice, there's probably a little bit of prep on the track or something. But if you're just like us and you're going out to ride moto outdoors, then you're totally, you know, relying on nature there to, you know, a lot of the time anyway, unless it's a race day, to kind of do its magic, you know. So,
yeah. What was it like when you were young on a sand track on like an XR75? Like, how did that work back in the day? Because it doesn't seem like that would be that easy to do.
Look, I don't know. We just somehow did it. You know, yeah, it just seemed normal. You know, it just, that's what it was over there, and we didn't really second guess it. So, yeah, it was just normal to get out there on the sand, and, you know, obviously the you know, the least, you know, we didn't have a lot of suspension travel, so I didn't really dig the track out a lot, you know, on those early days. But yeah, I mean, like Wanneroo had a junior motocross track. It's still there today, and it's a sandy track, you know, and we just dealt with it, you know. That's what it was, you know.
That's so cool. It's so gnarly to think that a 75 XR75 could go around the tracks like that. Yeah,
but it was cool because, you know, one of the good things was, and this is like when the wise men from the east would come to the west. You know, if we were going to race on a sand track, I remember one time they had the Australian motocross champs at Wanneroo. You know, and Wanneroo's probably one of the gnarliest sand tracks I've ridden in the world. You know, like it's like sugar sand. You know, and they had the Australian championship there. I was still in the junior category, but, you know, actually a guy called Pelle Gronqvist dominated the senior categories because he's a Swedish rider and he was used to riding sand in Sweden. But you know, but every time, you know, if they came to the west, it was a sand track. We're just like, yeah, you know, because we knew we had a huge advantage, like massive advantage. So.
Oh man, you would have absolutely annihilated some East Coast dudes in the sand. That would have been probably comparable if you rode at a hard packed track, you know.
Yeah,
they just would have had absolutely no idea what
they were I think they were scared, you know. So they're having a few sleepless nights trying to figure out how to make this happen, you know. So
man, there was I remember going to Wanneroo for the first time in maybe like 07 or 08. And I was just like in awe of that place, man. Like there was some local boy, like I think Dean Porter went 1-1. Dizzy got the dub there, but then you had like Michael Addison was incredible there. Like there were some brilliant riders that just looked so good. And then there was also some really impressive East Coast guys that were really good there. Like I remember Josh Keisha was real incredible in the sand, and it was I am a little, this is I guess off topic, but it's a little bit disappointing nowadays that the Australian Motocross Championship has neglected the WA, and I feel like if we want to take our Australian Championship seriously, you know, MA's taken it over now, so I think going forward our sport needs to look at WA, like maybe obviously not this year, but you know, next year. I think that if we want to call it an Australian Championship, then it can't be an East Coast Championship anymore. We've got to include WA. We've got to give WA the riders the chance to showcase what, you know, they can do on their tracks. Because I honestly think like we're losing out on a really valuable piece of Australian motocross, and a huge part of Australian motocross history as well, to just not go to some of these like incredible tracks. And for you to say like Wanneroo is one of the gnarliest sand tracks you've ever ridden, as a guy that lived in Europe, it's like, dude, we need to use that place.
Oh, 100%. You know, I always took the view, you know, in my KTM days and my management role there, that, you know, obviously I have huge insight into the market and how it works from a sales perspective. And WA generally represents 10% of the Australian market for motorcycle sales. So I always felt like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that the public, like our consumers and our dealers that we're representing with a race team, does the, you know, they're funding 10% of the race effort.
Yeah.
I think 10% means that you should go there and wave the flag, you know,
Yeah.
both for the sport, for the brand, you know, in that state. And I've always supported it. But, you know, a lot of the people sitting on the East Coast never supported it, you know, and also I think, you know, look at the great riders that have come from the West.
100%.
And their inspiration came from all the riders coming from the East Coast, the good riders, and competing in WA. You know, I remember Regan Duffy as a little kid talking to me, coming to those races and getting excited and getting motivated, you know. So you have a duty to the sport to go around the country with the National Championship Series and keep the sport alive, you know. And also at the same time, I think a bit like what we just spoke about with, you know, we're making the analogy or comparison to surfing. You know, one of the things lacking with the motocross championship is the quality of the tracks.
Amen.
You know, we've got to get better tracks in this country, more spectacular, more exciting, and wow, you know, Wanneroo, Manjimup, they're some of the best tracks in the country. You know, rather than going tracks that are next to a rubbish tip. You know, every motocross track is generally next to a rubbish tip, but there are some good tracks out there, and we've got to hunt them down. Okay, it's difficult to put the whole package together where you have a club or a promoter that obviously in a great area that wants to make this happen, but that should be the goal. You know, that should be what we're aiming at, and strategically it should be a strategy, and it should be a roadmap, and that should be what we're aiming at, you know, because as a rider, you don't ride on some crappy track, you know, you want to get pumped up and go, man, I'm riding Manjimup. That's the most fastest, most brutal, rough track in the country. You know, that's going to be a challenge. That's going to get me excited, let alone they're probably going to get 5,000 to 10,000 spectators there, which doesn't really happen a lot here on the East Coast. So, you know, that's what we should be aiming at.
Man, 100%. And I've noticed from what we've posted on our YouTube channel, because our audience is pretty much 80% American on YouTube, right? So we posted that video at Kyogle Sand Track, Americans frothing. Then we posted a video from Transmoto 8 Hour at Coffs Harbour, grass track, like Australiana, dude. Like that is some awesome Australiana. You're in this epic cattle farm with this beautiful grass track, and then you're going into this thick jungle, and it's like people really looked at that and were like, oh my God, that's incredible. Like that looks like Australia. And I really think that we kind of need to have a bit of a branding shift with our championship, because it's like, okay, we're not going to be the AMA. We're not going to be the pinnacle of where the fastest guys go and the most money gets spent, and then we're not going to be the world championship that travels all over the world and visits all these different countries. So what are we going to be? Like, let's be our own thing. Let's be different. Let's give people around the world a chance to just look at iconic, like, or create this iconic imagery. Like every Australian national should be at like this iconic place. Mate, there's 8 tracks in Australia that look fucking ridiculous. That if you package properly to show to the world, they'd be like, holy shit, Australia is so gnarly for motocross. Wanneroo, Manjimup, Gum Valley, Conondale. There's so many places, like, you know, you could keep going on and on of the list. You'd have to go out there, you'd have to do some work, you'd have to, you know, but dude, if we do 8 rounds of just insanely epic shit, that the world will pay attention, and it's going to look for a different reason. And, you know, we can kind of create our own little niche of a series instead of, like you said, just going on a fucking rubbish tip track with, you know, spray painted white tires to mark that. It's like, come on, we have to get past that. And I think that if we can bust out of the thinking of trying to compete with the other series and just like create our own lane, like we're going to be like visually, we're going to stun people with our tracks and our riders and the remoteness of our country, you know?
Oh, totally. You know, it's I couldn't agree more on that side, because there's with 25 million people, we can't be what they do in the US. We, you know, and Europe's a different ball game. You know, develop our own brand of racing and how we do it, and seek out. You know, hopefully over time we can seek out the better tracks, and hopefully, you know, environments where the sport gets supported. There's always those regional towns that really embrace and kind of support, an activity like a national championship round or something like that. But, the good thing is, look, I think, motocross in Australia is, it's been a bit of a reboot for this season with the Pro MX Championship kicking off, and I think we've got an opportunity, and I think everyone's pretty buzzed up about it, and there's some good people in behind it. I know Peter Doyle from AMA has got a great heritage. He really understands motorsport. Both at a level in Australia, but also internationally, and I think there's some pretty good people involved and pretty excited, and I can see a lot of the people, guys like Glenn Bell or myself or whoever. We're all behind it. We're going to front up, and I know Belly's been a few rounds, and obviously Daki's there because he runs a team, and we're all going to get behind it and try and push it along, and make it unreal again. So, and I'm sure it can be.
Yeah, and I'm fully on board as well. Like I want to do what I can do as well from our end. I think one of the things to get back to the WA national idea, you need 2 rounds there. You just have a West Coast swing. So you go from wherever, like whatever the easiest round. So like I guess Gilman this weekend is in Adelaide. And then what I would do is go, okay, so you go from Gilman to Wanneroo, then Wanneroo to Manjimup or Bunbury or any of these other clubs that have really been putting in an effort over a long period of time. And then you do, 2 back-to-back weekends in WA, and then you give the riders a chance to spend time in the sand before the event, and then you've got all these different storylines of local guys at local tracks, and CDR hires out this track for the day, Honda hires out this track for the day. I really think that you could create, and I mean from my end, I'm looking at this from like a content perspective as well, and I think that I've said it before, but the reason why the AME guys have done so well is because they're a content brand, a content company that runs an event. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's sort of the way that the world works now. Content is king. So you go over there, it's great content, you're giving people something, because it's so remote for the East Coast audience too. Like I love watching anything that comes out of WA because it's like got this remote, wild vibe to it, and fuck, I know I'm going to struggle my ass off when I go there, like it's just, I know that WA is where it gets gnarly, WA is where it gets raw, WA is where it's fast. So for me, it's like, let's pack the vans up, let's send them across, they spend a couple of weeks there. Surely there's a way to make it economical for privateers. We get a transport company to sponsor the privateer bikes, and you say, all right, if you're a privateer and you can't afford to drive all the way across the Nullarbor, then here we go, there's this is the option, you can put your bike in here, blah 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 blah. So I mean, there's definitely ways to do it. It's just gotta, like you said, there's got to be a structure there's got to be, I guess, a plan in place to say that by 22 we're doing 2 nationals in WA, and I think that really will like legitimize the series in like a bigger way as well, and give the WA riders a chance to showcase their abilities, give the young kids in WA new guys to look up to, new storylines to follow in the sport, and I think it'll be overall like a hugely positive thing for us.
Well, I think if you really look at what's happened with the racing in Australia, if you went back to, I guess, the 90s, early 2000s, you used to be able to race like 40 times a year, and the top riders would, there was Supercross, motocross, and local events, and then over time, these teams kind of grew and grew, and they became, I guess, what we call more professional, and they had full-time staff and workshops, and then semi-trailers came in, and then suddenly, for some reason, we just weren't racing as much anymore. And really, if you even look at the national championships in Australia, well, I think, what do we have? I don't know, 7 rounds.
8 rounds, 7 rounds?
7, 8 of motocross, and Supercross might be
5 or 6.
Yeah, so these teams now still have workshops, full-time staff, trucks, racing, I don't know, like 12, 13 weekends a year.
Yeah.
I mean, And then the way I justify racing, I say, well, what's it cost per race to go racing? If I divide the budget between 12 races, man, that's costing you a fortune.
Lot of money around.
Yeah, and really, you're not even getting to the west coast of Australia. You're not even sort of, representing your brands around the country.
Yeah.
It's one thing, obviously, online content, and I think that's the way of the world, and it's awesome. I get it. I get how that digital world works, and you can project it from this room right here to around the world. But I still think that the emotion of an event with a huge crowd and the energy and the impact that people have and brands have at an event, watching it with your own eyes on the day, that is very powerful. And I know that watching online is powerful, but I don't think it's as powerful as
totally
that
agree.
Experience. And that's why events are so important, and really having those events across the country is important. So to go to the remote places or go to a market that's still a 10% market and represent and get the people there amped up about what's going on. I just don't think the teams are agile enough now. They have to rethink their structure and their cost base and how they do what they do. And just like you said, it's a problem that needs to be solved. The problem is you're not agile enough as a race team. You have to figure out how to be agile to get around and not use the excuse it costs too much money to go to Western Australia. Like, you should figure out how you can go to Western Australia with the budget that you have. Figure that out. I think make the schedule that suits the stakeholders, and really a race team is really just a marketing vehicle. That's not really, if it's Honda, Yamaha, the way I would look at it is, that race team is representing my brand. It's marketing.
It's a billboard.
Yeah.
A traveling
so
billboard.
If it was my billboard, I want that to stretch as far. I want my dollar to stretch as far as it can. If I can do 10 races rather than 5 races, I want to do 10 races in 10 different places rather than 5 races in 5 places. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's my approach. So, and I think that they have to change the way they do it. But if I'm talking to an out of industry sponsor and I say, yeah, we just race on the east coast of Australia, we don't race all the way around the country, or we only go this a few times, I don't know if that's an as exciting proposition as someone that's getting all the coverage. So yeah, I absolutely, I think just people have to think about what they do a little bit differently and move around and not sort of be too restricted and just race up and down the east coast. And
to add to that, look at the AFL, like nationwide events, V8 supercars nationwide. There's a lot of the sporting, the sports that are really doing it on a large scale. They do hit like the V8s are in Darwin, Townsville, 100%. Gold Coast, Tassie. Like there's probably a boatload of people in Tasmania. Well, there's only 40 of them, but all 40 people that live in Tasmania are going, what about Tassie? It's the same argument can be made for Tasmania as well. So yeah, I'm all about it, whatever it takes to try and get that message out there that it should be a very even spread around the country. And the thing is too, like, you got to think about it in terms of event attendance. WA is just like frothing for it, man. Like, they really want that event. Like, you're going to give... I know Bunbury really wants a national. Mm-hmm. They've been putting in a lot of work into their club. We're doing a ride day there the Wednesday before Manji. And it's like, give it to some people as well that are frothing, like chomping at the bit, and will do anything to get a national and then to fucking impress when they've got a national. And then that bar... You know what I mean? The events are setting a bar up here. And then hopefully what would happen is the promoters on the East Coast and the clubs on the East Coast, like, damn, Bunbury turned up for that event. Like, we really need to maintain, like, that's the energy that we need to bring. And I think that kind of enthusiasm is gone when you go to the same tracks and it gets quite routine. Like, oh yeah, this is how we do the track. We'll get this many people in it. I think that kind of injection of like a fully fresh vibe into the series could actually like elevate the whole thing.
there's a lot of people out there that, like you say, particularly on that part of the country, that are absolutely thriving to get involved and put their energy into it. The one thing is too, I think you always have to decide what success looks like. What are we actually trying to do here? What does success look like? Does anyone know what it looks like? Everyone should know what it looks like. I know that success is different depending from what aspect you're involved in the series, because if you're a race team, it's different. Maybe if you're the manufacturer, it's different. If you're Motorcycling Australia, it's different.
Yeah, very true.
And if you're the spectator also, it's different. But I think in general, you need to find the common ground of what success looks like. And the one thing that really has irritated me over the last sort of 10, 15 years is, we're not measuring, the key elements, so how many people go to each round, and if the crowd's shit, that's fine. At least it's shit. That 1,500 people went to that race. So what was our marketing?
Yeah.
What did we do wrong? How can we do it better next time? That's what we should be trying to do. What was our social numbers? What was our competitor numbers? You have to measure it all. It's a business. We measure everything in business. We so much, so we can manage it, because if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So what are we doing with these motocross series? We need to know how many people come to the race, because everyone wants to sell fucking merch.
Yeah.
But if there's no one there to buy it, you can't sell it.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things, that revolve around people going to a race, and you need as many people as possible to go to a race.
Yeah.
So you have to understand, what's that going to take?
Yeah.
Do we need clean toilets for the girls to go? What's there in terms of entertainment? Top quality announcing, great speaker systems that are going to blow your head off. Like with music and energy and all these sorts of things. And create a real event that's a form of entertainment, and everyone gets amped up every year about going to that race.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. What do you think that, I guess like what you're saying is we all should have a common why. Like, why are we doing this? And if we do the why correctly, then that would be like a common success, or like a common thread of success through, each of the different people that you mentioned. So like, what is the why? Like, why should we be going racing? What does success look like for us in our own like local series?
Well, if it's local, it's all about having it's all about the competitors or the riders having the maximum amount of enjoyment and fun, and that's really what it's about. But if you just step all the way across to, say, the Pro MX or National Championship event, where manufacturers are investing a lot of money in their teams and riders, and there's obviously outside industry sponsors, then that's a bit of a different, the aspirational, the goal's different in that scenario, because you're trying to promote brands to as many people as you can, and try to have as bigger impact on people as you can. And I think, as we spoke before, you cannot have a bigger impact than really having a crowd of people at the event, getting amped up about
that are enjoying the event.
Enjoying the event. That it's great racing, it's informative. There's great announcers. There's you can hear the announcing, because that's one thing that also has been horrendous at most of the rounds I've been to, is some little pot shot speaker there.
Yeah.
So I used to go to a lot of races, a lot of rounds of the motocross championships in my capacity as a general manager of KTM and Husqvarna, and not even know really who won the overall on the day, because the fucking PA was so bad. I mean, we're spending a lot of money to go racing, and if I was a spectator watching that race, I don't even know who's fucking won.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, how dumb is this? What are we doing here? You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's just crazy stuff like that. Or if the race is being televised or live streamed, and they don't put the brand of bike that the rider's riding, So I'm a manufacturer, spending all this money. Regan Duffy's won the race, but they don't even say what bike he rides, just little things and little details, to give the value back to who's investing the money, because it costs a lot of money to do it at that level.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what level you're talking about here. I think for a lot of events, success for say if it's Transmoto, success is the maximum number of riders.
People, yeah.
It's 600 riders or something like that. That's success.
Yeah.
And then all those riders just having the most epic day ever.
Yeah.
So that's it's different. But success is a little bit different at the level that you're working at. So
yeah, I think too, one of the things, I mean, for me personally, like in my business, is Jay Reinenberg actually was a guy that he just 2 words: best practice. He just said like, oh, like there's just a certain level of best practice, right, for YouTube. And I was like, yeah, there is. There's someone that's doing it the best, and they have these processes in place, and they just follow this, like their own guidelines of best practice. There's a thumbnail, there's a this, there's a that. We uploaded the correct time. There is this model that you could follow that would give you like the best result, in your given field. And I guess that's the same thing in a motocross event. Like the things that you just described are like these best practice ideology. So I guess that would be the thing going forward, is like Pro MX gets this series. This is year 1. As long as they've got these like best practice guidelines in their mind, like, okay, every event needs good PAs, we need clean toilets, we need entertainment. Like the MX store, that they did one of their open days the other weekend, and they had like they had the gas expression session thing, then they had like a little Stasic hot lap. Perfect. Like that's ticking a lot of boxes just there, So yeah, I feel like as long as there's that best practice goal in mind of like, we need the manufacturers next to the riders' names, you need to be able to hear, then we can start to like build that series.
Yeah, well, it's really about building your template, right? And really, there's got to be standards. I always say in life, it's really what you're prepared to accept. If you accept mediocrity, you'll get mediocrity. If you want a very high standard, very high level, then it's really, you don't accept anything other than that. And so there has to be non-negotiables. It has to be on a checklist. It has to be a template. And if a club runs the event or a promoter, or whatever it is, that's the minimum standard for our series, for our event, because we don't want to drop it, because we then compromise what the public experience is, you know. So it's no different to franchising, a McDonald's or whatever it might be. It's exactly the same. There's no difference. It's a product, and the product has to be at a certain standard. It's not that hard. Someone just has to create the template and say, and make sure that things are done at that standard and at that level. That's really all it's about. So I don't want to go to a race in Sydney and then go to the one in Melbourne and go, hey, that one in Sydney was really good, but this one's, everything's different. There's no toilets, there's no announcing, the PA is terrible, this, that, the other. The marketing plan leading up to the event was non-existent, so it's a process, and a bit of a template, and we just have to develop that and roll it out.
So when you were at the first ever junior nationals, so when you, like, we're talking about all this as like there's a series established and there's all these things going on. When you were coming up, there's like none of this. So at what point does it even click in your head? So you've grown up as a kid in WA, you've flown around to some races as they're happening. There's no like real future, I guess, that's clearly visible at the time in Australia, I'm assuming. But like, when did you have this switch of like, oh, I could just ride bikes forever?
Well, I was exposed a lot to the speedway racing really early on, but I was doing, I guess, what you'd call mini cycle and mini bike racing, and I think by the time I was, what was I think I was about 14, 1979. So there was the English Speedway team came to Perth They used to have these test matches in Speedway. They were pretty cool because they'd have what was called the British Line Speedway team, which about 5 riders would compete against the Australian team.
Oh, really?
And they'd have these match races, and it was mega. The crowd really loved it. And anyway, my dad took the English team on his boat for a day, and I was kind of went along with them, and I was driving the boat, and we went to Rottnest Island, and
sick.
And we met this guy on the boat. His name's Martin Hignan, still a great friend today. And my dad got talking to this guy, and he goes, "Look, I know some people in America. I know Danny Laporte's mechanic, and this and that." And anyway, this guy ended up staying with us in Perth, and he lined up a trip to America when I was 14 years old in 1979. My parents let me go with this guy. He was only like 21 at the time, and we went to the States. We went to LA, and just really to look around. It was really just let's just go there, check it out. But on the way there, we stopped in Melbourne. At a guy's place called Elf Bond, and Elf at the time was the FMF importer for Australia, and he said, "Look, I got a few contacts in the States, and I know Jeff Ward's dad pretty well, Jack, and whatever." And he said, "Look him up when you go there. Here's his number. Give him a ring." So my buddy gave Jeff Ward's dad a ring, and he said, "Come around for dinner one night." I think Jeff was there. He was off racing or something, and he said, "Come around for dinner." We're sitting around dinner, and he goes, "Look, Jeff's switching from Yamaha to Kawasaki, and he's still got some bikes in the garage and some gear. Why don't you just come and grab those bikes? There's a race up in Northern California this weekend." And we weren't even thinking about we were going to race, but hell yeah, let's do this. And we got a van and went back to his house, loaded up his Yamaha.
So you just like jacked all Jeff Ward's stuff.
I took his JT gear. This is a true story. I had to tape over his name on his helmet and everything. And we went to this race. I think it was Dunlop Cycle Park or something. It was a Golden State Series race. I entered in the intermediate class. My friend, being a speedway guy, he was pretty laid back in the morning because, some of those races you have to get to the track at 7 a.m. for practice. And I kept telling my buddy, I said, "Man, I think, we need to be there early." "Oh, we'll be right, man."
Because they don't race till late at night.
Yeah, so we get to the track, sure enough, I fucking miss practice and everything, so I'm just shitting myself. I'm thinking, what the hell? So he talks to promoter Stu Peters, and he gets me a few laps behind one of the other races before my race. So I got a few laps in and went out, and I think I finished second in the first moto and then did better in the next, and then I rang home to my dad, and he just got all amped up. And next thing you know, we just bought bikes, and
wow,
it was all on, So, and then I trained with Danny Laporte, who the year I trained with him in '79, he became the AMA 500cc champion. And we were training out in the desert in Yucca Valley, running and doing everything. And really, that was, for me, that was a big thing. That, for anyone it would be. Like at 14, a kid from Perth.
That's the perfect time.
Goes there, and I get exposed to this professional racing, and that was it. It kind of just set me on my path, and really by the time I'd had that experience in the States and raced there and trained with Danny, came back, I reckon at 14, I might be bragging here, but I think I was pretty much the fastest rider in WA, period. Of course, because I had that.
Because you just went and you did a PhD.
I had that opportunity, and I suppose, it all comes down to the fact that I had parents that supported me, backed me, let alone had the trust in someone. Who would today send their kid at 14 with a 21-year-old they barely know to go to California?
And think about how big the world was back then, right? Like, even when it's funny when you just said, I got on the phone and called my dad. Instantly through my head, I'm like, okay, there was a fucking cord in the wall to this phone, and it was probably and all the numbers you would have had to dial to go from California to Perth back then even, that it's a big world at that point. There's no FaceTimes, there's no, you're getting on a plane, you're not hearing from your kid until, for probably 2 days later to find out that they've landed in America at 14. It's a big deal back then.
I guess when we look back on it now, or maybe your perception of it, it's a big deal. But to be honest, it wasn't really. I mean, we didn't know any better. That's all we knew at that time. And yeah, I mean, you thought more about how amazing it was going to be. Like, you thought, wow, I'm going to America, you know, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You didn't think about any negatives at all.
Yeah.
Like, you just thought, fucking, how cool is this? You know, you didn't think about anything that could go wrong. You could get hurt. You could, hospital. I don't even know about insurance. You know, you know what I mean? Like, it was just more about, wow, we're doing this, man. You know, like, we're going to the States, and I was pretty lucky. Danny took me to took me to a Supercross in Atlanta, and
oh wow,
yeah. Watched Bob Hanna, race and win in the mud, and I went to a number of test sessions where he was testing with factory Suzuki, and I got to see a lot, at a young age. I really did.
So that completely opened your eyes to, like, I'm sure a new world, right?
Yeah, totally. And really from that point, we got back to the States a number of times, and and I remember one year, we rented a house in Newport Beach, California, and Stephen Gore, Anthony Gunner actually stayed with us, and that was some of their first times really over there as well. So. Yeah, I mean, just getting exposed to racing at that level, you're really only ever going to get as good or maybe slightly better than your competition.
Yeah.
And obviously, the cool thing was you could do these Golden State Series races that all the factory riders did pre-season.
Yeah.
And really, there was barely an age limit. At 14, I could go in the same races as Bob Hanna or whoever, and do those motos, in the CMC competition. And so, wow, you just got exposed to this level of competition that was off the chart,
So it's interesting. I'm curious to know then. So you're racing in WA. You've obviously got, like, this potential to go faster, right? But like you said, with your competition, you're winning. Like, let's say you line up the best dude, second best dude in Australia, whatever, you're battling it out. You've only got to beat that guy by X amount to win the race, right? That's right. So your level of speed, that the potential for you to go fast, like, you probably could be going 4 or 5 seconds a lap faster in terms of, like, your overall human potential, but it's just not being reached because there's no reason to go that fast, or even mentally in your head, like, what your perception of how fast you can actually go is. But then I'm sure when you went to America, you saw a completely different, like, level of speed that you might not have seen in WA. Was there, like, a big gap, and then were you able to just be like, oh, fuck yeah, that's how fast you can go, I'll go that fast? Or, is that how it works, or how did it work back then?
It does work like that, but it definitely took a while, it took a while to kind of find the speed, because you can see, obviously you can see the speed that they have, but you kind of have to break it down a little bit and start to figure out how how you can't just get out there, on a motocross bike and hold the throttle on, because there's only one thing that's going to happen, so you have to kind of figure out how, and probably one of the big things is really your corner speed, right? We can all go down the straightaways with the throttle wide open, but particularly back then, the jump thing was there, but it's not like it is today with scrubbing and and the way the tracks are built. So your corner speed was really one you had to try and figure out. And I suppose a lot of the racing we did local there at Saddleback Park, it was like a real pliable clay surface, and they'd really plow it up before before the race, and it'd get these huge clay ruts in the corners that that was the one thing, being a rider from WA in the sand, I never really...
And you're getting stuck in these tracks.
Never really encountered these railway tracks, that you had to kind of get used to, and that definitely took some time to work that out, but, because I'd never seen anything like it, these big clay ruts that go like this at Saddleback, and how fast they, the one thing that was really noticeable, particularly on the 105s, is that you just never heard the engine...
Not on.
Yeah, not on, and then clutching, that was a big thing too, like just fanning the clutch, going a gear higher, into the corner, using the clutch to keep that rolling momentum, and then use the clutch to get out. That they were techniques that weren't really happening.
Really?
In Australia, no.
Really? Like even the clutch thing?
No, like fucking full hold, fan the clutch, gear higher, corner speed entry, get that rolling momentum. They're techniques that weren't really happening in Australia. So they're the things that we could look at and go, wow, that's different.
Wow,
That's
yeah.
different. How do we do that? Like, so they're the things that just totally opened your eyes up.
So so over there, actually, Rones, can you pull up a picture of like Saddleback? It was Saddleback Ranch, right?
Saddleback Park.
Saddleback Park.
Yeah.
Motocross. Let's Saddle, SADD. Yeah, there you go. Just go to images. Because where was Saddleback? It was in like Escondido.
Oh no, it was just it's in Orange County.
Oh, okay.
So it was epic because it was so close to that sort of Orange County area, like pretty close, like Anaheim and all those areas, really close. So it was kind of like an epicenter of motocross racing.
1974. What year were you
in America? I was there more like 79.
Yeah.
Yeah, 79.
Yeah, wow. Man, that blows me away, that whole clutch thing. That just wasn't a technique that was in Australia. So they were coming in and just like holding it on at the start of the turn, just going the whole way through it.
Yeah, and I think Bob Hanna was one that really kind of, got onto that early as well. And, particularly like the staff, just flat change and just blipping the clutch, through the box and stuff. So it was definitely, a more aggressive style of riding, and that we really hadn't seen, But again, it's all driven by the fact that there were so many riders, in this hotbed like Saddleback, that the level just started to go crazy. And I guess that's when the Americans really started coming up against the Europeans and really developing at a high level.
Yeah, man. How many people would have been in a race there, or like at those events? Was it crazy? Was it almost like a spectacle just to see the amount of people and riders that would show up at one of those Saddleback events?
Yeah, absolutely. There were, I can't quote numbers, but there were a lot of riders. It was just happening. It was. I think the industry was at a peak in terms of how many bikes they were selling every year, and the manufacturers had huge teams. They all had the box vans, so it was nothing. Honda might have had 6 box vans. Of riders. It was just huge. I mean, yeah, it was. And around Southern California back then, you could race. There were local professional riders that would ride. They'd ride Saddleback. They could ride Indian Dunes. They could ride
like Elsinore.
There were night races. You could do night racing a couple of nights a week. And as a pro, they have a pro purse, so your entry fee would get pooled, and then the promoters say, we pay back 80% or 100% of the pro purse, and then so that pool of entry fee money would then get divided into prize money, and so you could easily race 4 or 5 times a week around Southern California back then, no problem at all.
And so how, like, when you were there, were you just working on that technique the whole time? You were like, I want to ride like the Americans ride, and it was almost like an apprenticeship that you were kind of doing there to try and figure out how to go as fast as those dudes. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that must have been so fun. It was. Yeah, it was amazing. It just such an opportunity at a young age. So I'm pretty blessed, to be honest. That my parents supported that, and as I said, my dad, I always say that, and you see this with a lot of kids today, is that the parent has to be more motivated than the kid for a while. Really, to really facilitate it, to support it, to make it happen. Today, I know there was some riders, back in the day that didn't have parental support, but they still somehow found a way to get there. But that's gotten a lot harder to do today, to try and make it happen. So, you see these parents that are just totally, totally into it and supporting their kids racing, and I had that, for a long time. I'd say the only great thing that I also had was by the time I was kind of 16, 17, my dad kind of cut me loose, he kind of like stepped back from my racing a bit. He still followed it, he still went to the races, but he wasn't in the driver's seat anymore. Yeah, no, he let me do my own thing, negotiate my own contracts, and kind of set me on my way. So, because you see that also where some don't know when to step back, and so I was really lucky that he said, he just step back. Yeah, right. Yeah, there is so many things that have got to come together, right? Yeah. For these kind of a career like yours to come together, there's so many of these random elements. Like you add in, maybe you add in an overbearing father that doesn't let go of your career, maybe your career doesn't work out the way that it did.
Yeah.
There's so many things that got to play just right.
Yeah, there is. And another thing really that, I don't regret any of this, but, if you look at the Lawrence boys, obviously, their family's all in, right? Mum and dad are just completely all in. They decided the whole family was going to go overseas. I think when they first went to Europe, I guess, and
I think Hunter was probably only 15.
Yeah, like mum, dad, everyone, they like, we're all in, we're going to go, and obviously, that's a big risk, but hey, it's working out, and things are working for them. Where in my side, I at least had tremendous opportunities that nobody else had in Australia at that time, to go to the US, and then eventually by the time I was 17, I moved to the East Coast, by myself, and tried to further my career there. But in terms of going to the States, it's kind of hard to go to America unless you're 21 years old. You need a guardian or someone to So that's difficult, when you go to those sorts of places, to kind of get out of Australia, at a young enough age to where you're still going to maintain your development, So that was probably the part that was a little bit more challenging to do. So the only thing I could do was, I'd go to the States every year for about 3 months pre-season here in Australia, just to try and get that exposure to the high level of competition, to try to keep yourself, relevant until until I was finally able to make the move to the States. And I think I was 21 or something, and in 1986, when I first went to the US full time, so but by then I was already 21 years of age, so and then for the outdoors, I had to step back to 125. I did 250 Supercross, but outdoors I had to go back to 125. So just because no one really knew what the hell, who's this Australian guy?
So when you that first trip, you're 14, you did that time over there, and then you come back to Australia. What were those first few motos back in Australia like?
Yeah.
Like even just practice track, did you feel like a completely different person?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, my speed was just so much greater than I was still a junior competitor. I was still in juniors on 125s, and yeah, I just had a lot more speed than anyone else. It was evident, in practice, and so then I think then the challenge really was how do I maintain the speed? How do I keep it up? And so you could only really challenge yourself and go, if I win this race by 10 seconds, I want to win the next one by 15, or constantly try to push yourself.
And so, what was the scene like when you first, you're in those first couple of years of wanting to turn pro, and then doing those, Mr. Motocross races and things like that? Like, describe that era of racing when you first went pro.
Yeah, well, there was probably never, by the time I was sort of 14, I'd done those trips to the States. There was really no... I don't even remember having a conversation with my dad or my mum about my career or something. It was just a given, it was just it was just going to happen, it was you never, like most parents would talk to their kids and go, what's your plan B? What's your plan? What are you going to be? University. There was no conversation. There was nothing. I left school. I did my year 10 achievement certificate, and I left Rosswine High School, and I was just going to be a racer. We moved to a property out of Perth, at 100 or so acres, and I had some tracks, and I was going to be a racer. That's just what it was going to be. And I think by the time I was 16, it was my first season as a what they call a senior rider in Australia. So and I did Mr. Motocross. I was going to do the Mr. Motocross series. That was really the biggest, most prestigious series, because the Australian Motocross Championship back then was just a one day or an event. It was just an event over one weekend. Yeah, we would run all the classes, 125, 250, 500, and unlimited, they called it. So really, Mr. Motocross was the series. That's where the crowds were. That's where the prestige was. And the crowds were huge. I mean, they're getting 10,000 people every race, which doesn't sound a lot, but it's
that's a lot of people.
It's a lot for Australia back then. There's a lot of people, and it was a genuine 10,000 people, and it was big racing, and the big names, Stephen Gall, Anthony Gunter, Trevor Williams, Beetle Bailey. There was Ray Vandenberg. There's a lot of good riders, and I think my first year, I was 16. I was on a 450. You could only ride a 500, so I was on a 450 Honda at 16, and it was probably too much bike for me back then. And the first year is, we just travelled from WA there and back. There was a couple of the riders like Neville Cutts and stuff. So we'd load the van up and go backwards and forwards or do whatever.
It's a big commute.
Yeah, but I remember even as a kid racing mini cycles, we'd go backwards and forwards 3 times in a year in a van, like with a couple of the riders. It was no big deal. That's, what is it, 4,000 kilometres?
From here, it's 4,900 kilometres.
Well, from here it is, yeah, that's right. So it was no big deal. But that first year we just kind of ran around and got to races however we could, and I was, it's funny because I sort of, when I got into seniors then, I think my level had kind of dropped off a little bit, from what it was, but also having to adapt to the bigger bikes was a bit of a challenge, and so it wasn't really probably my greatest season, but at the end of the year I sort of did start to get some pretty good results and started to get the hang of it, and then I signed with Yamaha in 82, the Toshiba Yamaha team. I was Stephen Gall's teammate, and moved to Sydney at 17 by myself, and lived with a friend of mine there, and then I started to really see some results. I think the team was a little bit more professional, and I think training with Stephen Gall was a real positive. As you know, he's a super competitive
Still
guy
an animal.
to this day. He still wants to win. So that was a super positive thing, because we'd go running, and it was a running race, or testing. It was who wanted to be the fastest, and that was good. So my levels started to come up, and that was a pretty good season. I had a shot at the Mr. Motocross title come down the last round. I was definitely in contention at Emerald Park and double points day, and I had some bike troubles on that day. It was super frustrating because double points day, and it kind of like dropped me out of the contention to challenge Gall for the title, and so a third I think in points, but it was a good year. Won a lot of big races, and then I went on to Honda down in Melbourne, and it was a little bit up and down, but then during 83, 84, 85, that's when I really dominated Mr. Motocross. I really had some strong seasons, and particularly, I got Gary Benn on board as a mechanic. And
really?
Yeah.
Man, he has been around.
He has, he was really the first mechanic that really had that European experience at factory level, and it was a game changer once I got him on board. For 84 onwards, got him on board, and then things really turned around. So that's sort of also when I realised that you can't do it all on your own. You need good people around you. You need good mechanics and people know what they're doing. And once you get in that professional level, it's a little bit different ball game. And getting him in my corner was pivotal, and made a big difference.
So I think back then there probably would have been, like, the mechanic probably would have played a crazy role in success back then. Not to say it doesn't now, but I feel like the base package of motorcycles are just so refined to racing these days. And maybe back then the bikes, like having a really great mechanic could have like a percentage-wise like a huge impact on a motorcycle, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, these days things tend to be specialised a little bit more. So there's suspension specialist or there's engine specialist and so on, where really that didn't exist back then. You're looking for that person that kind of
could do the whole bike,
could get across everything. And he had that experience in Europe where he knew how to valve suspension, and he knew what geometry you needed. He knew what ride heights you needed. And then from an engine package point of view also, really understood that really well. So, So yeah, we could really get the suspension dialed in and get the right balance in the bike front to rear, and then from an engine point of view, and also you could have a mechanic, as because motocross is one of those sports too where it's that relationship, right? Between you and your mechanic and people around you, where you have to kind of have that person around you that kind of drives you or doesn't suck energy out of you, because you can have a great mechanic, but if the personality doesn't kind of work with you, it kind of sucks your energy, right? It kind of like gets your headspace, takes you out of the right headspace. So that's another part of it, and I think Gary's such a calm guy and just says a little bit, just says what you need to know, and that works pretty well, because I know my riding. When I came, when he saw me ride, he realized that, it was too much brake, too much stop and go, revving the bike too much, and he said, "Hey man, like that gear lever there, man, just use it a bit more, like just click it up a little bit more, and hey, that thing on the right hand side, that rear brake, you like jamming that thing on all the time, like just get that bike to roll and flow a bit more." And so a good mechanic can kind of also really coach you a little bit, I guess, and kind of they watch and see your weak points, because really coaching also wasn't really a thing back then. Okay, when you're a kid riding, your dad tends to be your coach, tends to critique you, or he can see what's going on, and so I mean that they can obviously bring it all together for you if it's the right one.
Man, I totally agree. Do you watch the Red Bull Moto Spies that they put out?
No.
Oh, so Red Bull do this series for Supercross called Red Bull Moto Spy, and not the last episode. I think the second last episode of this season. It's kind of like Drive to Survive, sort of, but Red Bull do it on like it's a YouTube thing.
Yep.
And man, second last episode. You got Carlos Rivera and Cooper Webb, and then you got Ken Roxon and Jordan, I think Jordan, whatever, I'm not sure his last name. Mate, huge contrast in mechanics. And you're like, that dude won the championship this year with that mechanic. And that mechanic also won 4 championships with Dungey. Yep. So you've got one mechanic that's got 6 championships with 2 different riders. And you've got this rider with no championships and that rider there, that mechanic with no championships. And in that episode, for whatever reason, with the way that you could see the communication between Coop and his mechanic and the communication between Ken and his mechanic, you're like, okay, I can see it. I can see 6 titles. I can literally see the advice that's led to 6 titles. I can see the encouragement. I can see the energy. I can see the vibe. I can see the way that Carlos communicates to Roger and Ian without Coop having to talk. There was, in just this one little episode and these few clips, you could really see, this is very, very important.
Yeah, I think sometimes, it gets overlooked, those...
For sure.
Those people, like, honestly, they can really, really make a huge difference, and obviously, like I said, there's got to be chemistry and it's got to work, but I think the smart mechanics or team managers or crew, they have the ability to understand each individual, their quirks, their personalities, and then get the best out of those people, because we're all different, and sometimes the high performance people, whether it be athletes or in business, can be difficult to manage,
For sure,
but they're high performance, they get the results, so we need them, and we have to find a way to work with them and get the best out of them. So and absolutely, it does actually, like I know in my racing in the earlier days, I didn't appreciate, those mechanics and those people, and Peter Laskowski, the mechanic in Europe, and then, great guy and really, did a lot for me, and, how hard they work, behind the scenes, these guys are, working incredible hours, like really are, they're kind of like unsung heroes sometimes, and, the rider's allowed to make mistakes. The rider can make a mistake, and the rider made a mistake. But the mechanic,
their job's hard.
But the mechanic's allowed to make a mistake. he's not allowed to cost that rider a race, and they're under tremendous pressure. They really are. So shout out to all those mechanics out there. I love your work. I reckon you're doing a great job, and I appreciate and understand how damn hard it is. But also, you're an absolute part of the success of any rider.
Yeah, and man, I couldn't agree more. And I've been around a lot of mechanics in person, and I've seen it. But for whatever reason, that episode, you should go watch it. Actually, I'll text you the link just to see if you get the same vibe.
Yeah.
But I watched it, and I've been around Carlos, and I didn't even appreciate it in person with the way that what he said and didn't say, and then even communicating to other people, so his rider didn't have to. I was like, dude, masterclass, absolute masterclass, and it looked so important in a way that a lot of people probably overlook it, and ways that I've overlooked it. And you're right, a mechanic can't make a mistake, and there's so much that's not in their control. Parts break.
Yeah,
things happen.
Absolutely, they do. Do. But it's getting that team, and look at what Roger's done with all these people, with Ian Harrison and all the people there. He's, they've all been together a long time, and they're a super team. That's. Yeah.
And the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah, the results are there, and it's very powerful. Very, very powerful team, and very tough to combat.
So what were your bikes like when? So you was it 85, 86, 87 where you were dominating Mr. Motocross? What were your bikes like then in that era compared to a production bike?
Yeah, I was. I don't know if I call it lucky, but yeah, my years with Honda, so I started Honda in 83, so then 84, 85 in Australia was with Honda. And, we did do a little bit of pre-production testing for the factory, so I'm sure they were doing the same in the US, but they would come down to the Australian market and the Japanese engineers. So let's say, was it 83? 83. The latter part of that season, we got that first generation 84 500. So the first 500 was air cooled, then there was a pre-production bike, so we did a bit of testing there. So we tended to get the new stuff a bit quicker than everybody else. So I got the first water cooled bike midway through the season the following year, and 84 it didn't really hit the showrooms till I think nearly the next year. So
how much better was that bike?
Definitely when it went water cooled, it was a good package. Yeah, definitely had a performance, quite a performance advantage over everybody. Yeah,
really,
yeah, totally. And obviously I had Gary Ben working on it, and yeah, so that helped. That helped. But I did honestly say, I 84, 85, I was, you have your seasons where you kind of, I think you go through, particularly when you're young, you go through some ups and downs, and it's more to do with what's happening off the bike.
Life in general.
Yeah, that kind of pulls at you and takes your focus away. So, I know in...
What was that for you?
Yeah, yeah, what was it? It's kind of hard to say. I don't know. You put your finger on any one thing. I think I think at the time you don't even know what's happening, right? You don't even know. You think, I'm focused. Well,
you don't know what you don't know.
I'm focused. I'm training, but maybe I'm chasing girls a bit too much, or maybe I'm just not training enough. I'm just kind of goofing off. I'm not really dedicated like I should be. Maybe not enjoying riding. You're just simply not into your riding as much as you were. And maybe some of it's a bit like that mechanic thing, or the bike's not as much fun to ride as it should be.
Maybe you don't have the freedom to just do
every
whatever
time,
you want.
Yeah, maybe you get on it and you're just like, I'm just not digging it as much as I used to. You know what I mean? You sort of get those moments, and you might have a crash or two, and you question why you're doing what you're doing. So everyone kind of gets through those scenarios, and I think that's where your mechanics or the people around you are really important, because if you've got that good package around you where the bike's always spot on, perfect, and every time you get on it, you love riding it, you're digging it, and you're into it, and then that kind of flows on. Your training's there because you're motivated and you're right in the right headspace. So it's kind of like you have to try to somehow at times dig yourself out of these holes. I know at the end of the 83 season it wasn't my best year, And end of the year, it's like, okay, I've got to reset here, because I missed going to the States before that season. I thought I'm going to go back to America, 3 months, and it wasn't always easy because Honda wouldn't give us bikes. I have to buy a bike and rent a ute and reinvest money back into my career. Like to kind of get back on track. And when I went back to the States, I actually did some good racing, some good Golden State races, and I think one year I actually got to ride Anaheim. So I think it was at a point in time when I think AMA actually was out there for a year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a different promoting entity. I'm trying to think.
Right.
Yeah. I think it was with Mike Goodwin or something, and I think AMA was out of it for a year or so. And a guy from Australia called Phil Christensen. No, not Phil. It was his name now. Anyway, a friend of mine. He was working for Goodwin and he got me an entry, into Anaheim that season, in the off season, so it was like January or something. And so I was going to ride Anaheim, and it was, the sport was strong. I mean, there was, they're getting 70,000 people at Anaheim, and just to make the 250, just to make the qualifying,
the night show,
I had to go through pre-qualifiers.
Wow.
To get into the night show qualifiers.
To then try and get into the night show.
Yeah, so there were 75 riders
wow.
entered for the 250 class. So, yeah. And I got to the last chance qualifier. I was leading the last chance qualifier. A corner to go, and a guy called, I think it was Kenny Keelan, kind of like T-boned me or made this really aggressive pass on me, and I didn't qualify, and I was so bummed. But but you learn lessons, like the move he made on me. No one in Australia would make a move like that on you.
Yeah,
so I wasn't thinking that someone would make a move like that. You know what I mean? I left the door open. It was my fault, clearly my fault. But that was the next level, right? That's what you learn, that it's more aggressive. They're doing it professionally. I'm taking that guy's money. And
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that dudes in Australia wouldn't really do it like that.
Yeah, so like that type of race, and
Cody Mackey found that out at Supercross in Tasmania too.
Yeah, I do. I was actually there. I saw that. Yeah, and that's exactly it, right?
And Cody's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, but he left the door open. That's, you don't do that, and that's what the next level does. So they're the things you learn, like coming from a kid from Perth racing there, where everyone's courteous, everyone's that. I mean,
and you're the man.
To
those people as well.
Yes.
People aren't going to take out Jeff Leisk in Perth. You know what I mean? But in Anaheim, old mate don't care.
You don't care. You don't care who I am. So, yeah. So, yeah, anyway, I guess to get back on track on that story, by the time I came back from that trip and a few of those experiences, it was, I really dominated, 84, 85. I was really ready to go. I trained hard in the US, got back on track, so I dug myself out of a hole from 83, and then it was sort of, a couple of super strong years.
And when you were dominating those Mr. Motocross years, where was your ambitions? Like, were you looking then at Europe and America as like I'm going to go be there full time? Was those years of dominating Mr. Motocross, was that for the next step?
Yeah, it was really. I wasn't really quite sure which way I was going to go, Europe or the States, but I definitely, through the years, I'd been to the States a lot more, and I was more familiar with what went on there. And so, yeah, I think by the end of the 85 season, because I think out of, I can't remember how many motos we had that year in Mr. Motocross, I dropped one moto out of, I don't know how many.
Wow, really?
20, so yeah, that's all. I won.
No shit, you were
every
killing them.
Oh yeah, every moto. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it's like at the end of that season, like, okay,
that's got to be fun. Like when you can go to the start line and be like, "Fuck yeah, I'm probably gonna win this by like a lot."
Yeah, you knew that as long as you executed, as long as you hit your marks, as long as you did ticked all those boxes, you probably gonna win. Yeah, you knew that for sure. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. Because the only person that's gonna beat you is you, right? That's one thing I've seen a lot in racing over years. Like a lot of the time, the only person that's gonna beat someone, it's like going to Fink with Toby Price. Yeah. The only person that's gonna beat Toby Price at Fink is Toby Price, right? Because Toby's gonna screw up and he's not gonna win. But if Toby does everything right, he's gonna win.
that's so true. Huh?
If he just makes one little mistake or does something stupid, then obviously he's not going to win. But all things being equal, the guy's going to win.
You could probably say that for everybody, really.
I see a lot in racing. I see a lot of time. I always think, hey, the only thing we need to do, if we do all our preparation, do everything right, we're going to win. We will win. But okay, sure, we can't always control the external factors, but most of the time.
But that's a process, though, right? So I'm thinking about that now. That literally applies to every race ever. Like the winner is almost predetermined if the processes get followed correctly. So let's think about Ken Rocks and Cooper Webb in Supercross. You could probably make the argument that if Ken Roxon did everything right in his own world, he would probably win every single Supercross race. Mm-hmm. Like there's not that many people that are as good as him on a motorcycle. But for whatever reason, he leaves like a bunch of boxes unchecked in most motos. And Cooper Webb kind of does the opposite. Whereas he's like, okay, I'm not going to be the fastest guy, so check, that's part of the process, but I'll be there at lap 18, I'll feel amazing, or you know what I mean? Like he's got his own boxes, so it's like, if Ken does everything right, Coop can't beat him just because the speed's not there. So it's like Coop's got his boxes to tick, Ken's got his, and whoever ticks the most boxes, like the race is kind of almost won before they start. Jeffrey Hurlings, if he doesn't crash, then he's probably going to win the race. Like there would be nobody that if he does A, B, C, D right, ticks those boxes, he's winning. James Stewart, you know what I mean? When you think about it, most races are pretty much determined, and it's a matter of who can just execute on like their own individual task. There's only on the off, there's those random events that happen, which don't happen a lot if you're doing the other things right as well, right?
Yeah, well, it's like a lot of things, it's no different to business or anything else. Follow the process. You develop a winning process or a successful process, and if you follow it to the T, if you don't deviate from the plan, and you hit all your marks and do all the things you need to do, most of the time you're gonna get the result you want. And so, that's what it was like. I just knew that as long as I trained correctly during the week and, I could trust my mechanic, I knew that the bike was always going to be perfect and how I wanted it. And then, and it all starts with, you roll into the track and what you do when you get to the track. It's all those 1%ers and discipline and attention to detail. And as long as you got your attention to detail and you're not skipping any steps and you got the process nailed down, then generally speaking, you're going to get the results you wanted. And so the end of that season, I was like, okay, I've done all I can do in Australia. There's no point repeating, this. And I think I'm a little bit like that as a person. I don't really, I get bored fairly easily, and I don't like too much of a repetitive thing. Just keep going over and over. It wasn't like it was going to be important to me to win Mr. Motocross 10 times or something. Okay, I want to go to the States. I want to go overseas race. How do I get there? Fuck, like no one's offering me anything. No one's offering me a deal to go to a US and race. How am I going to do that? So, we weren't really recognised. At that time in Australia, the talent wasn't recognised overseas.
How was it comparatively, though, in terms of riding? Like, you guys might not have been getting the recognition, but was the level just as good, do you think?
I don't think it's as close as what it is probably now, but there was definitely a couple of good riders, and I think on our day we could probably hold our own with some of the US guys, but I don't think we were, straight off the bat top 10. We might have been, in the latter part of the top 20, maybe.
Really? That big of a difference?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because, even as good as what I was going, 84, 85, I remember I rode a 250 motocross Grand Prix in the UK at Newbury. I think I finished 11th, in a 250 Grand Prix. So that's sort of, I was the best in Australia. Yeah. And I finished 11th there. Or, hey, I was the best in Australia and I didn't get through the last chance qualifier at Anaheim. What I mean? That was the level, So, probably fair enough. Factories weren't looking at Australians to join their team, There was some work to be done. So I had to figure out, how was I going to go race in the States? I had to solve that problem, and I think at the end of the 85 season, we did the Motocross of Nation, and I had a really good practice leading at Geldorf. I had good practice times. I was about 7th fastest, and I crashed in practice and hurt my back, pretty badly. So ended up in hospital for 2 weeks in Germany.
Oh, wow.
So what should have been, I think, an event where I really could have showcased my talents, and maybe that could have led to a deal. It didn't happen. I ended up in a hospital, probably just overcooked it a little bit, And but I think I'd kind of shown enough, and I think some people in the US, like Dave Arnold from Honda, he kind of knew of me and maybe thought that I could be a long shot. Maybe, okay, give this kid a support ride and maybe something will come of it. So that's sort of what happened. When I got, after my 2 weeks in the hospital in Germany, I flew to the States, and somehow I had an introduction to Dave Arnold and went and saw him, and he said, look, what I can do for you, I can give you 10 bikes, and I think it was 3-4 grand's worth of parts, I think it was. I guess with the bikes, they gave them to you so you could keep the bikes and sell them off, and that was it, that was it. And I was going to go race the AMA Nationals, 250 class in the Nationals. Sorry, 250 class in the Supercross. And I was going to race 125 Nationals, and I had to figure out the rest. How was I going to do it? So Peter Laskowski, I used to live with Pete, and so I said, okay, you come be my mechanic. I couldn't afford a Gary Ben, to bring him over, let alone he probably wouldn't have come. I was like I had to solve the mechanic problem, and then I bought a van and figured out somewhere I could live. And really, that was it. We flew over there. We're going to go race all over the US. I didn't sit down with a piece of paper and go, oh, it's going to cost this much money or anything. I was just going to do it.
Just winging it.
I knew I made pretty good money in Australia, so I knew I had money. That was okay, but I didn't really know if it was going to cost 50 grand, 100 grand. I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I knew I wasn't going there to fail. That was the one thing I did know. That I'm going to make this work somehow. So we went there, and I remember we got invited out to a test session at Simi Valley. Honda had a test track in Simi Valley. And I went out with a guy called Brian Manley, who was also a support rider for Honda. And Brian had come down to Australia once or twice for a Supercross. So he said, hey, come out with me. I'll take you out there. I was gonna test out there, and get out there. And I remember I'll just warm up on the motocross track, and get a few laps in. And back then, Roger was still doing a bit of riding, Roger DeCosta.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was still testing some bikes for Honda, like doing some R&D, test riding. And when you're on a track and you kind of see someone
out of the corner of your eye,
and you mark that point on the track,
yeah.
and then I come around the next lap, and I was like, oh fuck, he's pulling away, and then next time he's pulling away, I was like, oh fuck, I was like, I've got a little bit of work to do here. So Roger DeCosta, the old boy, the test guy,
just smoking you.
He's faster than me. He's smoking me. I'm the best guy from Australia, and he's like the Honda test rider, So
wow.
So I was like, oh shit. It was a pretty technical track, mind you. Pretty hilly, hard pack, and then I get on the Supercross, and there's David Bailey, Johnny Amara, Ricky Johnson.
That's a heavy lineup.
It's a heavy lineup, and I'm in deep. I'm fucking in deep. And they're doing shit on the track. I'm going, fuck, how do I do that?
Really?
Yeah. I'm like, fuck, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I've got a little way to go here. So, and that's how it started, and I think we got ready for that first race at Anaheim, and the Honda guys are great. Roger, the guys, I was only a support rider, but they'd give me some time, and they'd try to help out a little bit with my settings and try and get me on the right track. And Mitch Payton from Pro Circuit also took me under his wing and was helping me out, or helping us out. And I think I got 10th in that first race, in Anaheim, 250.
Sick.
Yeah. I did okay, so we're off to a good start, and I think, and back then people say, there was actually prize money back then, like I think just to qualify for the 250 main was $1,000, and then Honda used to match it, like with the contingency money, so they're like $2,000 to qualify, so, and that's how I basically funded my way around America, like the prize money. That's why I'm big on prize money today. I think racing here is still pay prize money because it gets the privateers to the next race, you know, and it kind of upholds the base of a sport. That if you just give back a little bit of money to the people that helps them get to the track on the weekend. So that's how I kind of got around the US. And funnily enough, I think once my results started to improve, we started making pretty good money. The only hiccup to that season really was a pretty major one. Was at the second race at Anaheim. I was pumped after at San Diego. So after Anaheim, I was pumped. 10th place. Okay, I think we can do this. We can make something of it. And Anaheim was muddy. Sorry, San Diego was muddy, and I won my heat though. I was like stoked. I won my heat, and then at the start of the main, there was I think it was like on the first lap. I think I started maybe 6th or 7th maybe position, and then Billy Lyles tried to clear this double jump that no one else had cleared the mud, and he got crossed up and freaking landed on my head.
Oh,
broke my jaw. So that just totally screwed my my Supercross season. And that was got helicoptered out of the track. And
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. So that was like, oh man, because that was really not long after I hurt my back at Galdorf.
Yeah, so you kind of just had a couple of bad.
And yeah. So I was like, what could I have done different? I don't think I could have. The guy just took a huge gamble, tried to clear this double that no one else was doing in the mud, and just crossed up and landed on me. So it was pretty bad. But it was again, it's a bit like the only question you really had for the doctor was how long is it going to take?
Yeah.
I just want to get back, and I also did a little bit of damage to the vertebrae in my neck, so it was, although that wasn't really any pain involved. I guess you still got to think, gee, what could have been?
Yeah.
But eventually, after having my jaw wide shut for about 8 weeks, I got back racing again, and I think we caught one of the last Supercrosses at Arizona, and I finished 5th in that race. So it was like, wow, okay, we're okay. We're back on it, and then did the nationals and struggled a bit, but we got on the podium the last few nationals, and then that set us up for a factory ride with Yamaha the next year. So even though it was a tough year and a pretty big setback at the start, I think we did enough to to get a name on the board, and yeah.
What was it like? So you were racing 500 Mr. Motocross,
yeah,
and then you go to race 250 Supercross. Yeah. And then 125 nationals. Yeah. Like that shit is unheard of these days.
Yeah,
what was
back,
that like?
It was pretty hard, stepping back in a way. It was a bit difficult.
If you could do it different, do you reckon you'd try and just stay on the bigger bike?
Yeah.
Like, does it make more sense to just get on it and stay on it?
It would have, yeah, for sure. It would have made more sense, and maybe I should have steered it that way a little bit, but I guess I was a bit like, fuck, I've got nothing.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's the only deal I can get. Probably hindsight would have said, probably even if I'd bought those bikes, I would have been better off. But yeah, I mean, that's live and learn. Yeah, maybe a bit better off, but hey, it was still, it wasn't like the racing. It was competitive racing. It was just having to step back a little bit and try and adapt to it.
Because it's just such a different bike. Like to go from 500 to 125 is just
for sure
a crazy big difference.
It is, but the Hondas were pretty good bikes back then. It wasn't like they were bad bikes, production, and so yeah. What does that mean?
Sorry, that's all right.
Screwed that up.
That's all good. Yeah, because I think about that even now, like, to talk about Regan Duffy. Like, Regan, I think, has potential on a huge scale. Like, world scale, he could be really, really good. But it's like, do you go to the States and ride a 250F? Like, you're a big fucking dude, and you're real good on a 450. Like, do you just back yourself on a 450 and spend a career on the bike that you're eventually going to race, or is there merit to being? I feel like when you grow up in the US and you're a part of that system, then it's very logical. Like you go Loretta's, then you do the 250 class in a factory team, and then you step up to the 4. Like it's a very natural progression. But the way that we do it here is like Regan will ride a 250F who won the under 19s, and now he's on the 450. So like you go up, and then you got to go back down to then go back up. Like I don't know, is it even to where, because like there's guys that have done that in Australia where they were like the champ.
Yeah,
450 dude, and then they go back, and then they're on a lights bike, and they're struggling, they're dieting, and it's just like the career path when you come from overseas. to get to America. There's a lot of fucking
can be, look at Chad Reed, I guess, because he was riding 250 two-stroke, I think, right, with Kawasaki in Europe, and finished second, I think, that year in the World Championship, and then he went to the States and was then on 250 four-stroke, right? So, it was equivalent of 125, I guess you'd say. So he kind of had to step it back a little bit to go there. I think someone like Regan, physically he's such a
big dude.
He's big, right? I just can't see how he could go to a 250. I could be wrong, but he rides that big bike so well. So if it was my advice, I'd say try and stay on the big one.
Just stay on the banger.
Yeah, stay on the banger. He's a great talent. I tried to get him across to Europe the other year there. I try and help him out a little bit, but I'm sure he'll get there in his own time.
Yeah.
He's a talented kid and rides real well, and that's
it'd be interesting though, like a guy like him he's leading the 450 championship now. It's like, do you just and it just made me think of it because you said I probably wish I would have stayed, just got on the 500 and just did me thing. So it makes sense. Yeah, it probably does actually. Yeah, it does. So but it just really depends a little bit on the individual, I guess, how your physical size and sort of how you ride. But if it's someone like Regan, for sure, I think probably in my case may have been better off because I'd spent so much time on the big bikes. Those last few years, But so what was the factory Yamaha like to go from being essentially like a support rider to then getting that factory deal? Like that's a pretty huge moment in your career, right? Yeah, it is. It's all about the background support that you get, the amount of testing and the amount of focus and you get from the different mechanics, engineers, whoever, to try and, I guess, customize that bike to try and tailor it to your likings and mold it around you. So we had a pretty good run in the Supercross. With Yamaha, we got a few podiums in there in the Supercross and on the Nationals. I think the bike was definitely, we struggled a little bit with the bike. That year, the production bike that we had to work with and obviously adapt was maybe not the best one, but we were running good in the Nationals. I think we were holding third till I broke my collarbone at the end of the season. So we're going well there. I think we finished fifth in the Supercross, and like I said, we got that's some good seasons, man. Yeah, we got our first few podiums, at Seattle and a couple other races there in the Supercross. So we were pretty solid. We had a reasonably good run, and for whatever reason, I think what happened, there was a bit of shuffling of teams. Mickey Diamond, who'd actually won the motocross championship the year on the 125 for Honda, got dropped, I think, by Honda because they were making way for somebody else, I don't know who it was. But so he went across to Yamaha, basically took my ride, and then I got pushed out again. So I really didn't have nowhere to go, and I went back to Honda support for that third year in the States. So it's kind of what happened, So that's ruthless, eh? Yeah, it's ruthless, considering I didn't have a bad season, and I got pushed out back to Honda support, but it was a higher level of support with them. I had a box fan, and I had definitely had a lot of contact with the right people. So again, So finally, I was obviously 250 Supercross, and they had that was a bit unusual year because we had a split season. So if you're riding in the open class or whatever, you sort of did half of the AMA Nationals on a 250 and the second half on 500. So really? How'd that work? So I think you had like a separate 250 outdoor championship over like say 6 rounds, and then you had a separate 500 championship. So all the same riders would ride 250 and 500. So it was just a unique season how they did it like that. You know what I mean? So I think I was 6th, 7th. I think I finished in the 250, and then I was really poised for a pretty good result in the 500. I think I had 3rd place till again last round, derailed a chain at Washougal and dropped me back. That was a little bit frustrating, but. Yeah, that's how they did it that season, So, it was a reasonably good season, and then during that year actually I got a chance to ride a Grand Prix at San Marino because David Thorpe had got hurt. He'd broken his collarbone, and Dave Arnold came to me and said, "Hey, the guys from Europe, called me. We're looking for a rider to go ride this round at San Marino," and he says, "I know you've always talked about maybe doing some Grand Prix. Why don't you go over and do that race?" We had a gap in the schedule, and
I went and did San Marino and rode Dave's bike, and his father Keith was my mechanic, and
Wow.
yeah. And the other chain thing got me again. I think I was leading that first moto and the frickin' chain derailed again. So there was a problem with the chain guides back then. They didn't really go all the way back onto where the sprocket is. They kind of sat forward.
And there was just a bit of space.
I had this unique talent to be able to derail the chain. So it happened to me twice in that AMA National season, and then it happened to me there, and then I went out, won the second moto, you know. So it's sort of, I was definitely quick. I think the US level was pretty high then, and when I went there, I was definitely right at the front. So
and who was in that race with you, like the second moto that you won?
There was, I think there was Gabors and a few of those. I'm trying to remember who was there. Obviously Dave wasn't there, but all the other riders of the day, I guess. So. Yeah, and they sort of gave me a taste of Europe, and then I thought, okay, I'm gonna switch and go across to Europe, because it was more about a bit of a journey. My racing, I was keen to experience a bit of everything, and so next year I went to Europe.
There's that love of like wanting to experience different things. Like, where do you reckon that came from in you? Like, I could see that maybe being a part of like being from Perth and being so isolated to where it's like, yeah, let's see what is out there,
I don't know, I've got some Aboriginal blood in me, so maybe I've got a nomadic.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I've got a nomadic streak in me, maybe. I don't know, wandering streak.
Walkabout. Jeff Leisk going walkabout. That's your career.
But a bit of a fast fact there, actually some of it's interesting that myself, Chad Reed and Craig Anderson all have a little bit of that. So maybe there's something there.
Hey, I've played enough football to know that if you're Aboriginal, you're good at shit. That's it. There is something
and
there.
who'd think or imagine that kind of marries up with a motorcycle, that's a kind of an interesting one. But anyway, yeah, I think you could be right. Maybe it's from Perth. Maybe it's just my personality, and I can never stay in one place too long. So the lure of Europe and what people always said about racing in Europe and the tracks and the culture, and it's interesting, right? It's something that you want to experience. Maybe not everybody, but I certainly did. It was super interesting. And something I wanted to do. So then I lined up a ride in Europe for the '89 season, and again it was kind of like a support ride with Honda. They gave me good material. We were able to work from their workshops in Ulst in Belgium, and I was able to put together some sponsors and whatever to kind of make my own team. And that's the year we went out and ran second in the title and won a few Grand Prix and whatever. And so Europe was interesting, and we'd had a bit of a taste of the Supercross there, because when we were doing the US Supercross stuff, we'd go do Bercy and all those races every year.
Was Eric Bernard still involved in it back then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
He literally just texted me the other day, like out of the blue, to say g'day. He's such a good dude, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. So him and a guy called Xavier Adois.
Yeah.
I had quite a lot to do with both those people when I was in Europe. And,
yeah.
But yeah, small world. I remember he came to visit me in Perth a few years back.
Wow.
When he was traveling around the world.
Wow. Yeah, he's a great guy, eh?
Yeah,
great guy.
Yeah, but yeah, we did a bit of stuff in Europe with it, with that. Okay, it's not the same as motocross, but so got a bit of a taste of what that's like, and yeah, it's good to it's good to experience. With again, racing a bit like surfing. You want to go surf in a different part of the world, right?
Yeah.
Some want to surf in Indonesia, some want to surf in Brazil, some want to surf in France, and so I think riding bikes is kind of similar. Like, why wouldn't you want to go race in a Grand Prix in France or something where they walk into the track at sort of midday with a baguette under their arm and a bottle of red wine and some cheese and sit on the side of the hill and watch motocross. You don't see that from Perth. It's different. And so it's all about just this journey. It's seeing some different cultures and different ways of racing and so on.
And so how would you explain the difference between the GPs and the AMA at that time?
Well, yeah, one of the big ones was obviously the length of races. That's the first thing you got to contend with. The
extra 10 minutes,
the 40-minute motos plus 2 laps, and
yeah.
and obviously you have to, for the full, you have to do a full 40 minutes before you do the 2 laps. So if it's 39 minutes and 59 seconds when you go past the tower, you got to go around again, and then so some of those races can sort of get close to 50 minutes, so they're long races, so that's, and I guess that's probably why, to an extent, okay, the Europeans didn't have Supercross, so that obviously kind of didn't influence the way that they rode, as like the Americans, and the tracks were a bit different, and then also the longer races. So if you looked at the European riders back then, they were kind of much more conservative on the bike. They conserved their energy, what I mean, because of the longer races, so they had a more conservative looking style, but they were fast,
efficient.
They were efficient, and it's like anything, you roll into someone's backyard where they know the lay of the land and they've been there before and they know the way around. They're always going to be hard to beat, and you get a lot of different tracks, Holland sand, and then you've got all sorts of different terrains you got to deal with in Europe, on the tracks. But when I was there, it was a good scene because you obviously had, I think, about 12 Grand Prix in a season, and always pretty good tracks, mega tracks, and then you did a lot to fill in the time in between. You did a lot of what they called international races, where I guess clubs or promoters would run these events, and you'd get start money. They'd pay you money to go to that race. And you had a guarantee, to just appear and put on a show for those people. So you'd do 20 or so of those races, in addition to your Grand Prix. So, but yeah, still the level was pretty high. History proves, guys like Dave Thorpe or Gabors, even at times when the Americans went to Europe, they perform well, right? They're great riders, so yeah.
What was so I looked this morning on the actually motocross Wikipedia, just like motocross GP championship or whatever. So I looked on the Wikipedia page for the there you go. Look at the riders from Belgium. So go down all the way. So no, keep going down. Sorry, down. Just when you said you moved into Belgium and went out of the so keep going. So World Championship by nationality.
Yep.
Belgium total 52 world champions have come from Belgium. So now go down a little bit more, even rounds. Look at the top. So you've got the World Championship by rider. Stefan Everts 10, Belgium. Tony Caroli 9, Italy. Joel Robert 6, Belgium. Roger Da Costa 5, Belgium. Joel Smets 5, Belgium. George
Jobay.
George Jobay 5, Belgium. Erica Burrs 5, Belgium. And then you go in that top list. Then Harry Everts 4, Belgium. So dude, what a country for motocross. And I don't you kind of know Belgium, if you're just a fan, but to see it in that statistical format of just how dominant and how important Belgium was for motocross. So I can imagine that moving to Belgium and being a part of that is a pretty crazy experience just in itself.
Oh, yeah, it's probably, being a kid in Perth, it's something that we acknowledge then that Belgium was kind of the home of motocross, and it's where Joel Robert came from, or Roger Da Costa, and so it was just something you dreamed of, that, and then obviously later in life to actually finally get to that place and then absorb it all, the scene, the environment, and it's pretty special, and those results are pretty amazing, aren't they? Really, like if you
Oh,
look how
insane.
dominant Belgium has been over time. It's produced some incredible riders, that's for sure.
Do you remember your first ever moto at Lommel?
Hey, first one, not really sure, but
Or like even practicing
but
there?
I do. But honestly, I do remember some days there. I remember one year I'd been back in Perth over the Christmas holidays, where it's like it's 40 degrees and
yeah.
hot and dry, and then they wanted me to get back to Europe fairly early. It might have been late January maybe, or mid-January.
That would have been torture.
Start testing at Lommel, and it's actually sleeting, like ice coming out of the sky, and they're like, what does the bike feel like? I can't feel it.
They're like, I don't know, man.
I can't feel it. So yeah, brutal. And they're the things, the conditions. You come from a warm, sunny, beautiful place, and to do your job, you got to go around Lommel, I guess, and get your headspace right and get into it. Do some work.
Was it the same brutal kind of place that it is these days? Because I watch like Jed Beaton's Instagram's like the best. He rides Lommel constantly, and he's always pumping out these sick videos from Lommel. And I messaged him and I was like, dude, you just make it look so easy. And he's like, this is not easy, dude. Like, I don't know if it looks easy, but it ain't easy, man. I'm struggling. But like he's gotten so much better there in his time because of the amount of like laps that he's done. But it's just got this like brutal like mystique around that place.
It is brutal. It's hard to find enjoyment.
Really?
Going around Lommel. Yeah, it's brutal. It's always been brutal. Yeah, and it shows, right? I think, was it the year they had the Motocross of Nations there?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. So, it shows it's a tough track, and but I guess that's some of the culture that's come through from the riders from Belgium. They're always well conditioned, tough. There's kind of this. I guess the bar's raised pretty high there, right, from the get-go. So all the riders, up and coming, they've always had, from their own country, the riders that have set the standard for their.
For like the riders that follow on
for
from
the ones
them,
for the ones that follow on,
yeah,
for sure, yeah.
What was the highlights of Europe for you?
I think being the first Australian to win a Grand Prix, that was a big highlight for me, to do that.
Because they would have played like the national anthem. And,
yeah.
That's pretty. What track did you do that at?
It's called Ruskasanta in Finland.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So a little bit sandy. To be the first Australian to win a Grand Prix, and obviously win my first Grand Prix, that was special. Something you only dreamt about, and. Yeah, that was cool because the funny thing coming from Australia, particularly back then, was that the US racing, we all as a rider and if you're in the sport, you know how tough it is, but the media in general here, or the people generally, didn't acknowledge America as being as tough as say Europe, or as prestigious as winning a world championship. Grand Prix or something like that.
Yeah, right.
So you got a lot more mileage and a lot more sort of notoriety out of performing in Europe rather than the States, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, right.
I think they caught on eventually, particularly with Chad Reed's success and so on that he had in the States. That it sort of gradually got in the press a bit more, but back then, no, that really wasn't the case. That really anything world championship was more understandable to the general press and media. Yeah.
And how did that perception of you change when you had you started winning GPs? Like, was that then when it was like, oh, Jeff Leisk is like,
yeah, I
think
man. So. I think a bit more. It was definitely, a lot more exposure, a lot more acknowledgement. That actual race, I think, was televised on SBS.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I think finally, there was a little bit of some way to kind of, to get something back to Australia, like what was going on. So, yeah. Cool.
It's a crazy time then, because now we're just so used to like, everything's just this instant. Like, we can literally watch the motos if we don't watch them live. Like, I literally knew this morning that as soon as I opened my phone, I opened my YouTube app. I was like, the Formula One highlights will be the first thing that is on my phone. Like, even technology's got it to the point where like YouTube knows what I want to watch first thing on a Monday morning after the Monaco GP, but that just didn't exist in your day.
Not at all. No, nothing. So people were, people that were in the sport were obviously pretty hungry to kind of get a hold of anything they could, any sort of information or something. So, thankfully there was a little bit of stuff starting to flow back to Australia that they could see. But, largely being a sport, like, let's face it, motocross is still kind of a fringe sport, and it's not a mainstream sport. And so, yeah, it's kind of hard to get on the radar a little bit as a sports person, like if you're up against the ball sport formats here, AFL or rugby or cricket, so it's hard to kind of take your place as a legitimate sports person,
So did you end your career in Europe, or like how long was that career? The European leg of your career, like what was some of the movements that you made through there, and then I guess like some of the European highlights for you?
Yeah, well, really it was just 89 and 90 in Europe, and then at the end of the 90 season, I decided to basically finish up my professional career as it were. Definitely didn't really achieve what I wanted to, both in America and Europe, for whatever reason. I mean, who knows why. I guess you could go back and look at it, and you definitely know.
Sounds like a few chain.
You definitely. Well, you definitely know. No, not really.
Yeah.
I think that probably. To really find success, you probably have to stick at it longer. Really 3 years in America, you probably need to go a bit longer than that, in all fairness, and even in Europe. So you just really got to stick at it. But, it's like anything. I think if your headspace isn't right and you're not really enjoying as much as you should, then, should you or shouldn't you continue, So I just decided not to. I just felt like my headspace wasn't really there to keep going and doing it. And, I'd been away from Perth a long time. I'd been on the road and on the East Coast, the States, Europe, and I was sort of like, I just miss home. I just want to go home for a while. So it just got to me, and I decided to go back to Perth at the end of the 1990 season, and I don't really regret it, I guess for me there was always racing was a chapter and a part of my life that I had some great experiences and did some good things, and I always felt like I wanted to get into business too. It was always another part of the journey. And again, I wasn't really sure how I was going to do that. I didn't go to uni. I didn't, but I'd seen the world. I'd seen part of the world and seen how some things work and don't work, and I wasn't really sure how I was going to get into business, but I did. I found a way. Yeah,
so that's interesting because I know you more as a businessman than a rider, and like I've been around you in a KTM capacity when you were steering that ship, and nowadays too, like at our conversations we talk about what you're up to business wise and the different things that you've got going on. So there's obviously. And so Mick Doohan is similar in that respect. So Mick finishes his career, like a relatively short career, and then decides that, he wants to go into business. So it's quite interesting that, Craig Dack, I mean, he's still in racing, but he's a businessman. He runs a business. Yeah. So there is something compelling about business. And I'm sure that there's a competitive nature that if you have a competitive drive in some capacity and you aim that at business, it can definitely like serve you well and maybe fulfill some of the same things that the racing almost did in a way as well.
Yeah, I think it can totally. And I think, to be honest, I did feel like I left a bit on the table with my racing career. I probably could have done a few things a bit better or worked a bit harder, and so, yeah, I kind of did have a little bit of that kind of, something kind of burning inside, when it came to business. Okay, I can fix a few things here. I can, apply myself a little bit harder and be a bit more dedicated. And when I got an opportunity with KTM in Australia, back about 94, was really probably started in early 93, 94. Yeah, I mean, it was, fortunately, sure, I didn't have business acumen at that point in time, but I certainly had seen a lot. I sort of, through my whole career, I'd seen quite a bit, from my days in Perth to the early days in the US and then in Europe, and obviously worked with different factories and so on, and so it does give you a pretty good overview of everything. I think the most important thing that I had was, obviously it's all about sales. My role was, eventually GM, but it's all about selling product. How do we, we got to sell. The one thing that I did understand was the motivation somebody has to buy a motorcycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you don't come from that background and you just, maybe you can learn that. Maybe you do learn that in university, in sales, or maybe the background. But I think I did have a really deep understanding of
why people would buy one bike over another.
What's the trigger? What are the triggers here? And every part of the industry is a little bit different. So you've got mini cycle, you've got motocross, enduro, road bikes, adventure. So the one thing is try and understand that, what's the motivation, what's the trigger, why is someone going to buy, that bike versus another. So, there were some things that I learned, in my racing that I was able to kind of transition into a new career, a new way forward. And the good thing was, it was, we also, with KTM early days, we started a race program, and so sure, I knew a little bit about racing, and I wasn't experienced at running race teams, but I certainly knew enough about it to be able to get the ball rolling, and so that was my next chapter, so I've been on the other side of the fence, and then with KTM growing the business from probably 400 bikes in the first year to when I departed March last year, around 14,000 bikes a year. So quite a journey.
So what was the initial setup, and how did that even come about to where you got into the KTM role? Yeah,
well, it's kind of a long story, and I guess we got time to talk about that today, so we'll go with it. But I being exposed to Speedway, at the Claremont Speedway, when my dad raced, they raced bikes, cars, like sprint cars and midget race cars, and so on. And I always, as a kid, I really liked the sprint cars, really, really fast and exciting V8 motors, and so, when I kind of finished up racing bikes in a 90s season, I had an opportunity, to try out some sprint cars, and I was like jumped at it because it's something I always wanted to do, and then I raced for a couple of seasons. I raced for a friend in Perth called Jeff Kendrick, and did not too bad at it. We won a few races and finished like fourth in the Australian Championship in the second year, and was doing pretty good at it, and one of the sponsors of the team, actually, his company had the opportunity to sort of gain the KTM importation rights or distribution rights, and I guess he thought of me. I suppose he thought, well, this guy's not long out of his motocross career. He's pretty well known. We'll get him involved in KTM as endorsement or whatever, and that sort of opportunity was put in front of me, and I guess after a couple of years, I'd kind of it was a good break and kind of just chilled out a bit and kind of was able to clear my head a little bit from the racing stuff.
You get back to like normal, because it's not a normal life when you're a professional motocross rider at that level.
No, it's not. And I suppose when you're a professional, that means that sometimes you have to do it even when you don't want to.
Yeah.
You know, there's some days you just maybe I'm not 100% here, but you kind of have to go do it, you know. So yeah, it's you know, people say to me, oh man, it must have been, you know, incredible racing in America, or you know, so yes and no, you know, like, yeah, sure, it's an amazing experience, but you know, there's always pressure, right? There's always pressure to perform, and it's a pretty grueling schedule.
Internal and external.
Yeah, it's a pretty grueling schedule. You know, I think we were doing probably a lot more races back then, and we certainly had a choice there how many races we did outside of the national events. But yeah, some years I did a lot of races. You know, I remember one year I did 52 races. You know, it's because we used to do five in a week, 4 nights in Bercy and 3 nights in Switzerland at the end of the season, and I used to come back and do some races in Australia, and so yeah, it was, you know, a lot of racing. You know, like in 1 year I'm doing more racing than some of our riders doing
a career,
doing 3 years. You know what I mean? So you kind of you know, you get a lot of exposure to it. But yeah, anyway, look, he thought of me, and you know, I wasn't really sure, to be honest, because you know,
would have been weird at that
because
time,
there's that Japanese European thing, you know, more so back then, you know, like there was a bit of a stigma around European bikes. They were built differently, and they were a bit different, you know, and I wasn't really sure if that's something I wanted to do, but I sort of just, you know, like anything in life, sometimes you take a punt, right? You kind of weigh up the odds, and you think, well, maybe this can work. And really, at that point in time was just when KTM was coming out of bankruptcy. Stefan Pierre had got involved, and it was really the start of that resurrection of KTM from really bankruptcy. So. Yeah, I got involved, and really the first couple of years I was really just endorsing the product. I was racing the Thumper Nationals a couple of seasons there and won the title in the second year, and really just endorsing the product, but getting a little bit, you know, involved in the business. You know, they were bouncing ideas off me and so on, and then I think the third year of involvement, I started a race team, motocross race team for them on the East Coast, and I think it was a year before, actually, we'd already been doing a bit, and that's when we got Anderson on board and a few others, and then I moved my family to the East Coast, and we started a KTM motocross supercross team, and you know, did that with reasonably good success, and you know, try to kind of like break through with the brand, I suppose you'd say, and it was a fair bit of grunt work and just try and get it happening, and I guess in that time, you know, I took a share of the business. I kind of got involved. I was a shareholder of the business, and then after 3 years, I sort of decided, you know, okay, I've had enough of running these race teams. They're hard work, you know. Riders, parents.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty grueling. It's hard yakka, but it was fun. You know, we broke through, broke some new ground here and there, and then there was an opportunity. The existing manager was leaving, and there was an opportunity to take on the role of I guess sales manager at the time, and move back to Perth to do that, because that's where the company was based, and I really wanted to do it. You know, I really did, and shareholder of the business, and that's where it all started. You know, and I really probably didn't really know what I was doing when I first got in the seat. You know, but I guess I really wanted to do it, and I was really motivated, and I just worked at it really hard. You know? There were long days. You know, I think my first 10 years or so, there were 12-hour days every day.
What were the main challenges then? Because you were behind.
Yeah, look,
you know what I mean? Yeah. Like in terms of market share, in terms of product development, in terms of brand image, all of those things in that particular time that you were in that seat, KTM as a brand was behind. Yeah,
there were a number of things. You know, I think the product, it didn't perform too badly, you know, like in terms of its actual performance. I think reliability was definitely a problem. That was challenging, and it was a stigma that honestly has taken nearly to this day
a long time
to get rid of. You know, like the KTM name, or the acronym KTM.
Keep taking money.
Kick 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, in all fairness, I mean, when I got on board, my friends just fucking hammered me. Like,
I bet.
Yeah. you'll never win a race, you'll never do this shit, like, yeah, it was like,
it was real.
What are you doing? Like, and but I think that motivates you, right? Like the more they give it to you, it kind of motivates you. And not that I really personally had any control over how well the product was eventually going to get developed, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, we would give as much feedback as we could, but that, hey, we're not the ones actually making decisions on this stuff. So, but really the challenge was establishing a dealer network. So, the network really, developing a strong dealer network, but you do need a bit of product to go with that to give dealers the confidence to, because at the end of the day, it's a business decision for your dealers. So there's no doubt that there's dealers that are enthusiasts and there's dealers that are business people. There's all sorts out there. But establishing that dealer network, building up the supply lines with spare parts and accessories, and having good floor plan financing for the dealers, because that really didn't exist previously. So it was just step by step, kind of inch by inch stuff. A lot of travel from the West Coast to find new dealers, a lot of dealer meetings, a lot of conferences, a lot of contact with the dealers. It's like anything. The more you can communicate with someone, the more contact, and just over time, we just kept breaking down the barriers and building better relationships with our dealers, and we just eventually, as the product started to improve, we just grew and grew. I think as a country, we were always I think a top performer, in terms of market share for KTM. And obviously other brands came into play with Husaberg, and then then we had the transition to Husqvarna, and I guess obviously here in the end there was Gas, which I didn't really have a lot to do with, but quite a journey from building a brand of, I think we had maybe started with just under 30 dealers, and then by the time we expanded to the New Zealand market and took that over, and so on, amongst all the brands, we had well in excess of 100 dealers, 120, 30 dealers. So, it was, like I said, it was a really, really cool journey, and fortunate again to have some good mentors and some people that helped me on that journey. And a lot of fun.
So there must have been a point where, on the outside looking in, people have still got that KTM, like keep taking money, kick the mother, that sort of thing. But internally, there would have been a point, I can imagine, where you would have been like, no, hang on. This is going to be what it is now. Like, was there a point in your career where you started drinking the Kool-Aid and you could see the light at the end of the tunnel that has been actuated now, but those people are still doubting you, but you knew that this was really going to turn into what it has now? In terms of motocross, and obviously in enduro, I think they're always kind of competitive. I think one of the game changers really was the first electric start enduro 4-stroke bike. The what they called the racing engine, I guess, 4-stroke engine. Being electric start, 4-stroke, lightweight. That was a game changer, I think. Suddenly we had a product that everyone wanted. Never ever discounted that product for a long, long time. So what model was that?
I think that would have been, early 2000s. So try to get the year here. Super early, might have even been just before, but around 2000.
Like at one of the EXC models.
Yeah. That's sort of like when we had a product in our lineup that because I think back then no one had electric start. Yamaha was electric start. No one had it. It was like okay, we've got this lightweight 4-stroke electric start. Everyone wants it, because that EXC enduro market, as you know, in Australia is huge, and it's not really what we call enduro here. It's like we trail ride on enduro bikes. And that was always a difference to say the factory. Like in Europe, an EXC is for enduro riding. Like
Yeah.
you can't really trail ride in Central Europe, like you're not allowed to.
Yeah,
so, so at the application use of our product's always quite different in our market compared to theirs. So we'd have problems that they never had.
Yeah.
Because we're trail riding on our bikes, like riding 300-400 kilometers through, tough terrain and all this.
Yeah.
Where they're just doing like hardcore enduro, so our market's different in that respect, and or with desert racing bikes or whatever, which maybe they do a bit in the US. But yeah, I think when they had that product, and obviously, I think when KTM also made the decision to stick with two-stroke, that was a stroke of genius, really.
Really?
Pardon the pun there.
Yeah.
But, when Pera sort of went, the Japanese decided that, okay, we're out of two-stroke, I guess biggest motorcycle market in the world, California, is not going to approve two-stroke on the street, but obviously off the street they still do.
Yeah.
And that's the two-stroke motorcycle for KTM's been that's been a winner.
Yeah.
Sticking at that, particularly enduro and all the rest, the 300 EXC model.
Yeah.
And then putting an electric start on those has been successful, and so they've dared to do, I guess, what the Japanese haven't done in a lot of respects with bikes, and been the first, to do that. But even before the new era of when Stefan Pera was involved, KTM was actually always quite innovative. But they just couldn't really refine the innovation.
They just didn't have like the back end. To like, they had the ideas but not the execution.
Yeah, where in the end, they really got good at refinement. And one good thing they. In Austria and I guess Germany, Germany obviously has one of the biggest automotive markets in the world, and so there's a lot of universities there for mechanical engineering, both there, Austria. And so one thing I always noticed actually at KTM was a lot of the engineers were quite young, hardworking, young, but with fresh ideas, like no...
Man, I've never thought about that. Like German engineering. Like there would be a system that produces German engineers that
100%.
Are responsible for German engineering. And that gets plugged into the Austrians.
Yeah, same with Austria. So I think
I never thought of that.
So I think the TPI system, the transfer port injection, was developed in concert with a university. So
wow.
So there's they've sort of had this fresh, innovative thinking, which I think has been advantageous for them. In that respect, young engineers, young fresh ideas, prepared to think outside the square. I think any thinking sometimes that's anchored too much by the past can kind of weigh you down. So, where if you can just think without restriction of past experience sometimes, and just just think, well, what does the public want? What do they need? Let's just give it to them.
Yeah, let's
not try and tell them what they should have.
Yes,
let's ask them what they want and give it to them.
Yeah, and not look to the future through the lens of the past.
Yeah, because
just look to a completely new future.
Because I think one of the biggest mistakes you make sometimes, and I've certainly made a lot of times, is that you try to preconceive, which you try and do, but sometimes it's your own idea and your own thought that you're trying to force onto the public. You're trying to force that. Where sometimes it's just easier to ask them, hey, what do you actually want? Okay, fuck, I'm going to give you, and you just give it to them. You just fucking don't complicate it. Just fuck, is that what you want? I'm going to give it to you. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, and that's what KTM did.
Yeah, it's like our adventure rallies. We just ask the question: what sort of a ride do you want? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Okay, let's do it.
It's not that hard, is it, when you put it like that?
Let's just do it.
The one thing too that I remember thinking when I was growing up, because I guess like when I was really racing seriously, it was like 05, 06, 07, 08. 09, like that was when I was really, seniors and racing and having a crack. And I remember looking at, like, I'd be on the start line for my race, and then like the 85 class would be out, and it was all KTMs, and then the 65 class, and it was all KTMs, and the 50 class, and it was all KTMs. And I remember thinking, I was like, if they've got this market share now of these kids won't want to get off a KTM. They'll have relationships with like Wayne Leonard Motorcycles was the Cairns dealer for us, and it's like there's these kids that are going from 50 to 60 to 80, and then the 125s got real good, and then the 250Fs got real good, and you just see these kids that had spent their whole life racing a KTM because they had the best 50, and then they had the best 60, and then they had the best 85, and it seems like KTM just made lifers. They just didn't give these kids a choice. They were like, here's the best shit, and they just caught up. You know, they had they had this monopoly on the youth, and then while they had that monopoly on the youth, they were working on giving those youth then the platform to go forward, and now you've got so many kids that have grown up never really riding other bikes.
Yeah, I think it was a clear strategy. You know, it was a deliberate strategy, and you know, when you get involved with a brand, it's a bit like a football team. When you're a fan of a football team, you know, like people generally don't change too much. You know, once you're barracking for a certain team, you like to be part of a winning team. You know, so I guess that kind of strategy is one they went with, you know, with the 50s, the 65s, 85s, and certainly something at a local level we really focused on for the exact reasons you just pointed out.
So you guys, that was like an active strategy of KTM Global and then like the Aussie company as well?
Well, 100%, and that was certainly one area that I really understood because I was a kid that, you know, like I said, when I started riding, you know, that's when mini-cycle racing started in Australia, and so I understood it, you know, I understood that end of the market pretty well, and I understood the relationship between the parent and the kids and kind of how that all went together. And so, here at a local level, we always focused a lot on the junior segment. You know, we ran the KTM Junior Cup series for a number of years where we took, 5-6 riders across to the
US,
to the US World Minis. And so, we put a lot of energy, a lot of effort into that area. And I felt it really paid dividends, I think, in the end, you know. That's just absolutely part of it all. You know, where are the riders of tomorrow going to come from? You know, people forget. You know, I think, you know, even corporations, they kind of sometimes don't. You know, I don't think you pick up off-road riding generally when you're 25 or 30s. I mean, some people do, but
it is quite rare though.
But it's kind of an activity that's that you pick up when you're young. You know, you to develop the cognitive skills that you need and to be able to do it in a way that you enjoy it. It's obviously, when you learn when you're younger, it works a lot better. And it's, hey man, you get hooked, right? It's a drug, you know. You get hooked. We're all hooked.
Definitely.
We're not cured yet.
No, I feel like it's like herpes. You get it and it doesn't leave.
Exactly. No, but it's true, you know. Like any kids that get on these bikes, that's it, man. They're done. Like when you do it at a young age, you're there for your life. And I just knew that the more we could get addicted to riding motorcycles, man, they're customers, and they're going to be customers for the next 50 years. You know,
And you've seen it, and it's crazy that like Yamaha have only just bought out a 65. How long did that take?
Exactly.
They lost so much market share. To KTM just because KTM had a 50 and a 65.
Totally. You know, the only thing I always thought of, and I never really got it to happen, but you know, you've either got like the little fun bikes, or you have motocross bikes. There's nothing really in between, if you know what I mean. I always felt like there was a market for more of a like kid's enduro bike. You know what I mean? Like kind of like an EXC. Because, you know, the one thing about motocross, I mean, obviously from when I was a kid, when I started racing on a, you know, say an XR75 or something, you know, if you could jump 3 feet off the ground, you're a genius, right? With that suspension travel. But now on a 65,
you can literally jump 110 feet.
You can jump 110 feet, right? So it's a different ball game, different sport, different level of danger and risk involved. And obviously, mum and dad are the ones that, you know, obviously bear the consequences of anything that, you know, the kid does too, of course. I'm not saying they don't, but you know, not everyone wants to be a supercross or motocross rider. Yeah, sure, the fun bikes are okay, but I just feel like, you know, that there should
be something in the middle.
Should be something in the middle, yeah.
It's interesting you say that because we did Dust Hustle on the weekend, and they had a grass track there, and I posted on Instagram last night, said, new rule, every time you ride QMP, your first moto has to be 25 minutes on this grass track with your mates. Because, fuck, I have not had that much fun on a dirt bike in, I don't know. I literally could not tell you. And I actually thought about what you said. I was like, man, I kind of want like a TTR 230. And I want to put some like cool forks on it so that you can actually like go hard into some bumps and like just have this slow bike that I can just like hold wedged like a go-kart. Yeah. And like imagine if we were all on those bikes and like the safety levels there and the battle, like it tightens everyone up. So you are right. And I've thought about myself, like we didn't grow up with two-stroke. Like my first two-stroke bike was a CR125. And me and Maddie both shared a TTR 125. Right, that was how we grew up riding, and we'd rode our mates like that raced, and our first races we did were on a TTR. Like I raced senior lights on a TTR 125 before we even got motocross bikes, and I think now that I don't know that I would want to buy my kid a 60, like a 65. They just seem too gnarly. Like I remember being
that's what I mean, you know. Yeah. Like I had so many people come to me when I was at KTM. I want to buy a bike for my kid, you know. And I said, you know, first question, well, do they have any experience? You know, have they ridden? No. I said, well, sorry, but I don't have any bikes for that. Yeah. You know, like that's not what we do.
But then a 50s too, like a CRF 50s, not. You know, you can max that out so quickly.
Yeah, really quickly, you know. And I just think that there's like something to ride a little bit more kind of, you know, just off-road generally, you know, whether it's a crossover, you can do a little bit of track, but you can also just ride trail with, you know, follow around or on a property or something that's not gnarly like a, you know, like all these little two-stroke 50, 65s are just too gnarly, right? The power band, you know, it's like a light switch, you know, so an 85. So, you know, I just always feel like there's a room for something in between. It was a project I really wanted to try and get started on, but never quite got there. So
someone got in my DMs the other day. I'm not sure how this come up, but they said, imagine how cool it would be to have like a motocross bike mixed with like a step-through scooter. So, like, you didn't even need to throw your leg over the thing. You know, like, you could actually... Because how many kids can't even touch the ground and they're using, like, the start blocks and, you know, like, they're on, like, these big, powerful machines for these kids. Yeah. Imagine if there was some way that you could... Almost like a CT 110 kind of layout.
I've got something and I'll it's secret, but I'll give you a ride on it one day.
All right.
You'll be impressed.
Yeah, because like...
and you can step through.
Okay. So do you think the step through is like kind of important for the concept maybe?
I don't know really, to be honest. About the step through bit, I'm not sure how that works exactly.
Probably because of ground clearance.
Yeah.
You get a bit screwed for clearance.
Could be.
But there's definitely...
You might bend it in half, you know. Cause
that's true too.
Yeah.
But like, I've never done it. I would love to do it. But you know that 24-hour scooter race?
Yep.
Like, dude, best idea ever.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Shit like that. Like I think that, you know, I think that's why events like Transmoto are doing so well. This weekend was my first ever Dust Hustle. That event was incredible. Like, they killed it, man. That just brings out the most random group of people on the most random motorcycles. Have you ever been to one of those?
Nope.
Yeah, you should definitely go to one when you can. Like, custom-built bikes, like full-on custom-built bikes that these guys can go and race, like on the natural terrain track. But the vibe was crazy good. and it was all set up around fun. There was very loose checkered flags, 45-minute, each track was just open for 45 minutes. So it was just kind of a free-for-all. But just the onus on fun, and yeah, just that grass track, man, like the fun that we all had on that grass track. Like, nobody got off the track for 45 minutes. Like, I did 3 tanks of fuel in one day of riding, and it was just that to me, I was like, all right, there's really something to this. And I mean, imagine making bikes that were really specifically for that event, and I'm not talking like fast, because my 350 is probably, if you want to go fast around that track, 350 is probably the best way to do it. But like, how do you get the most out of that? The most fun out of that event would probably be some really weird, odd bike, like, that's got some forks from this and a TTR 230, and you know what I mean? Like, you could really make something where it's just fun.
Yeah, it's like I said. I mean, that's the beauty of two wheels, right? You can just have a lot of fun on them, on two wheels. That's really the bottom line, because I've been lucky enough to do a lot of different types of riding, whether it's adventure riding over long distances. I've done road racing. Kids, you do BMX, you do mountain bike. It always seems like it revolves around these wheels, and the two wheels, and the dynamic of it, that you have to balance, and trying to master it. You're always being challenged, and trying to master it. So, yeah, you don't need a lot, to have a lot of fun, like you experienced on the weekend. And I think it's always a lot more fun with some friends, right? And some mates, that's when you really, really laugh and have a good time, and it's cool.
So with the I think to talk about your story, we probably can't miss the era that you had with KTM in Australia in terms of its factory team, when it was like a in-house program. You had Ross McWaters that was running the team, and then yourself as the general manager of KTM. Won a bunch of titles with Ryan Marmont, with Jay Marmont. You had amazing talent go through that race team. Like, did that kind of scratch a lot of the itch as well for you? Like, really, because like we sort of said, that was at a time when you guys were really winning Supercross races on a KTM when other countries weren't, and there was a big effort that went into that Australian outfit, and it won a lot of races and a lot of championships at a time when KTM wasn't as dominant as what it is now. Yeah,
well, really, in early phases, I was really the one responsible for putting the team together and getting the riders, and then when I transitioned out of that, end of '99, Rob Tyrold actually was the person that got involved. And, I think at the time Rob was with Kawasaki, and I think he'd done a bit of work with Andrew McFarlane and so on. But Rob was really someone that was on our radar, and we were so fortunate to get him across, and he was really a game changer, for the whole race program. He really stepped it up. I was okay, but he really knew his stuff, and Rob's a really smart guy, and really passionate about racing, really dedicated, and really once we got Rob on board, he really put together a super good team, and we had incredible success, but really, it's a super good outfit, with Rob, and he brought in guys like Danny Apro, and so we built up a super strong team. Obviously we had tremendous success with Craig Anderson, both in Supercross, motocross, and obviously we used to do a bit of Thumper Nationals back then, and won a lot of races there. And then with the Marmont boys, both Jay and Ryan, we had some very, very strong years. We also had a lot of success, like you said, in Supercross when KTM went to the kind of at the time, I think, a bit controversial PDS suspension, linkless suspension, and certainly in the States they weren't having a good time with it at all in Supercross. I think you remember even when McGrath came on board for a little bit there,
didn't work out,
and in some ways that did more damage than good. Rob figured out a way to make the PDS work, pretty well. Okay, we're not quite US level, but here in Australia, we were having a lot of success with that bike with the PDS suspension in Supercross.
What made that PDS system so different?
Well, without the linkage, you lack progression, or the link obviously does. I mean, the link will do a lot, in terms of compression and it's rising rate, stiffening the ratio of the shock, so it sort of has bottoming resistance, but also has a compliance, in the early part of the stroke. It's easier with a link. Yeah. And with PDS, you're totally relying on the valving, and also they had this like needle thing in the shock that created the bottoming resistance. So, it was just a much different animal, and it was quite unrefined in the early days, the PDS. So, but like I said, we sort of figured it out for at least what we were doing, and we won a lot of Supercross races with the PDS bike, here in Australia. And at the time, all the competitive teams, like Craig Dax always run a good team, as you know. Yeah. Kawasaki had good riders. Suzuki, with Jay Foreman.
Yeah. He had like a dynasty there as well.
Man, there was some solid teams out there, Yeah. And we just had a good outfit together, and Rob led it extremely well, and good riders with the Marmont boys and so on, and obviously with Ando and some others that came along, So it was a cool time, We were really the first team to get the semi truck here, and good days, good times, Yeah.
And it kind of was a legitimate factory team too, in a way, because I know that you guys were running the 52mm works forks from WP, which you can't just buy those forks, and there was a lot of legitimate factory parts that were going into that KTM race team in that era too.
Yeah, there was, and we were at a time where we were really trying to really try and break through against the Japanese. It's hard to advertise second place, as you know. Yeah. And racing's one of those things. It's you can sort of spend a certain amount of money to get an okay result, but in some ways it's wasted, right? So you have to weigh up whether you just want to go that little bit more and really go for victory. Go for it's again relates back to that football team thing. Everyone wants to be part of a winning team, and if you're winning, people want to come on board, right? So. And so we, that was something important to us at the time, and we really focused on it, and were able to, I think, be pretty successful. Maybe at a time where maybe in some other markets they weren't quite as successful, particularly in Supercross. So which at the time in Australia was that was the biggest show for off-road racing.
Yeah. So you get into you do the America thing. There's no plan. You didn't crunch the numbers. You just went for it, and you figured it out and made it happen. And that was kind of the same in business. So you were like, I just going to finish racing. I want to do business in that same sense, really without a plan. So, and then now when we look back in hindsight, you're at KTM for 25 years, turned that into one of the biggest brands in Australia. What is it then do you credit that to? Like, what's that thing inside that lets you go, fuck, I reckon I can make it work? Because you did in both times. Yeah. You made the racing work, you made the business side of it work. I mean, what is it in there that let you do that?
I think it's just a certain determination. Once I can get a lock on something, I'm pretty relentless and determined, and you don't want to fail. So you give it all you got, and in some ways in business I probably gave it more than I did in racing. It was certainly, I was probably biting off a fair bit more than I could chew, and I was pretty determined to obviously not fail, and you just put a lot into it, a lot of effort, a lot of time, to try and make it work, and obviously as an individual, really stepping outside your comfort zone. There's a lot of times you're very, very uncomfortable, so really have to believe in yourself and what you can do, and you can be pretty uncomfortable in the early days, when you particularly in business, and that's not your background, and you're presenting in front of boards, and our KTM eventually was part of a larger automotive group, or the Automotive Holdings Group, which that went public. So for a large part of it, we're a publicly listed company, and that's a bit different ball game as well. So but I think the one thing is it's no different to racing. You want to win, you want to win. You don't want to fail. And so I wanted to win against Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki. I wanted to beat them. I want to beat them on the track. I want to beat them off the track. I want to beat them in sales. I want to be more innovative than them. We want to, tap into the market in ways that they haven't thought of. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to beat all those brands. It was not even like racing. It was just, we wanted to be more successful than they did, and obviously that was all about ultimately selling more bikes, gaining more market share. And obviously as time went on, you also wanted to build a viable brand or franchise for your dealers, because that's ultimately what helps you to grow, because, you need, dealers are part of your sales channel.
Yeah.
And you need to build something that they can make money out of, that they can be profitable with, and if it's something they see that it's a stronger, more profitable franchise than another, suddenly you've broken the wall of the dam, and then you're going to get a lot of momentum. So that's that simply just that motivation.
And so last year, you end up essentially like quote unquote retiring, but you're probably as busy now as ever. But when you look back on those two, I guess those two different careers that you had, I mean, how do you feel looking back at what you've kind of done over I guess your life's work up to this point?
I think firstly you have to feel fortunate. Not many people get to live their dreams. Fortunate to have great parents that allowed that to happen, to give us the opportunity. Again, not many people, get that in life, and I had that, so super fortunate, blessed to have, met a lot of really cool people that, because that's the cool thing about what you do. You just meet so many great people along the way with racing and in business. So I mean, I just feel really blessed that I've had those opportunities, been able to execute on a lot of them. And if I look at my life, it's sort of gone in sort of 25 year blocks, and first one was racing, and second one was business, and I think I still have a bit to give in terms of business or whatever else it might be. Normally I need a couple of years of rest, in between.
To fire back up.
Recharge the batteries, They get drained after a while. But, one of the reasons I also want to just take a bit of a break, my daughters are 12 and 14. I've got two boys as well, a little bit more grown up. I just want to have a little bit more time with them before they obviously disappear. But I mean, I'm thinking about the next move. I'm not sure what it is yet, but something's going to be there. I'm just doing a little bit of part-time work currently with the Motorcycle Holdings organisation.
Oh, yeah,
which is Australia's. I guess it's the only publicly listed motorcycle group in Australia, but also it's the largest group. I think about 41 dealerships, and the Cassins import business, and the big box stores, and so that's been interesting. Do a bit of work with them in the retail area. yeah, so I still feel like I have a lot to give, and I've had a lot of great experiences that hopefully we can do, move into something. Really enjoying the motocross champs and seeing where that's going this year, getting a bit energized on that again, and obviously the COVID thing with the motorcycle industry has been phenomenal, just crazy. So that's been cool. I mean, a lot of people that obviously maybe motorcycling was something that they kind of put on the shelf a bit. They've got back into it. That's exciting. That's happened in the US as well in a big way, and other parts of the world. So it's probably a pretty damn good time for motorcycling, particularly off-road, because if you really look at the numbers, at least here in Australia, it's off-road really that's really surged, big time. So, yeah.
All right, so not controversial, but been wanting to get this off my chest a little bit. Maybe you can offer some insight. Motorcycle sales up fucking percentages like we've never seen, like 30-40%. Is this time for the people that are making that money to save that money and line the bank accounts and do that whole deal, because we're now in prosperity and they've been through some hard times, which is kind of what I'm seeing happen in certain ways. There's riders that have been cut pays, and there's some stuff that goes on in that. Yeah. I get it to a degree, but in times of plenty, which we're experiencing now, what should we be doing as an industry? Is it the time to be putting money in the accounts and lining the pockets? There's an extent that every business has to do that. But what extent should we be reinvesting into the industry, into the infrastructure of our sports?
Yeah, well, I think leading up until COVID, and obviously just, right when COVID hit, which was probably March, April last year, when it really got bad, things got serious. With, okay, this thing's going to be serious, and whatever else it's going to be. Up until that point, the motorcycle industry, I'd say pretty well on a global level, had been in decline.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Year on year.
Yeah.
Year on year, and things were getting tough. Things were getting marginal for a lot of companies, right across the spectrum. Be it new bike sales or accessories, whatever you want to call it. I think even event numbers and things were in some areas under a bit of pressure. So it's been a tough time for everybody. And then when COVID hit, I think March, April last year, sales were down significantly, like 70-80%. People just going, wow, what
what do we do?
They were restructuring or about to drawing up plans to go, well, if this is what it's going to be, my business is going to have to look like this. And then really May or whatever it was, April, May just kind of resurrected itself and just went off the chart basically. And so really they've only had, maybe 12 months where it's been, really solid and very, very strong. I don't think it's going to last forever. I think even now it's just things are just leveling off a little bit and softening. But yeah, I think, you've still got to reinvest, for the future. So it's just at what level that is. I think some companies have really backed away quite significantly from their marketing budgets and so on, which I get to an extent. But you could also argue there's an opportunity maybe for some businesses and some companies to kind of like nearly double down, if you want to use that word, because we have got some of these people interested again in motorcycling, so you kind of want to make sure that you can keep them interested in motorcycling. So yeah, I think strategically, I'm not here to give everyone advice.
I think you're in a unique position.
This is just my point of view, and I guess I'm allowed to throw that out on your show, right?
Well, 100%.
Yeah, so I think it is an important time to think about. Okay, we've got an opportunity here. Let's make sure that we can maintain contact with these people. You just have to figure out what's your best way to do that. I think I've always been a big believer in events, and it's a bit like you've come in today pumped up about what you did on the weekend.
For sure.
And that's because someone ran an event. Okay?
Yeah.
So events are very, very, very important to motorcycling. And I believe one of the most important things. So in sort of the part that we're in, I mean, obviously riding on the road's a bit different. It's hard to make some sort of unique event for riding on the road. Adventure riding, yeah, you can do a bit around that space. But off-road riding, like dirt bike riding, you can be really innovative. You can really just come up with all sorts of weird kind of events that people just have a great time doing, right?
Yeah.
And make it really accessible. So events are very important. I always felt like in the days at KTM, okay, we sponsored events. I most of the time didn't sponsor the event because we thought that was going to be great publicity and our name would be there and that's going to sell bikes. Honestly, that was probably the last reason why my mindset around sponsoring event. I would sponsor an event because it helped someone run an event, to run a better event. If someone's running an event, people are going out on a bike, getting energized, getting excited, burning up parts, burning up tires. That's what makes the world go round. Innovative, fun events. That's why we got behind Transmoto, because they're fun, right? They're getting 500-600 riders. People are frothing. They run them all up and down the East Coast. In WA, Willie Thompson, the promoter of Manage 'em Up, he runs a similar event series in Perth, and people froth about it. We've always supported what he's done. We've always run events together. I've always put in a lot of feedback. Let's do it this way. Let's do it that way. Okay, let's do it. And again, it was always about, hey, attracting 400, 500, 600 riders.
Yeah.
And events. That's what makes the world go round. These bike games. So yeah, people should be getting more involved, supporting promoters, supporting clubs, helping them to run great events, and keeping people riding motorcycles. That's what they should be doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, I wanted to ask you that because you are in a unique position. Like, I can comment all I want on that kind of stuff, but I've never run a manufacturer. I've never been involved in a Cassins or you know what I mean? And to me, so I've got feedback from brands, right? So we started talking to some companies and they're like, hey, we want to give you this much money in advertising, all sweet, let's fucking do it. And I'm like, oh, that's like life-changing for my business. Like, I've got an employee, I've got ideas of content I want to do. Like, we're going to manage them up. I've got a couple of $1,000s in sponsorship that'll maybe pay for our fuel. The rest I'm just going to have to make on my ad money. And it's like, it's a little bit frustrating to hear people go, they're like, yep, cool, we're on, and then they'll sell out of a product that they wanted to advertise. And then they're like, nah, sorry, we're just not going to do it. And it's like, okay, I get it. I get it on the balance sheet of that particular product. But we're in a time now where, okay, dirt bike parts are selling themselves. You don't need to advertise your dirt bike parts. You don't need to advertise this specific model for this specific part. So that's cool. They're selling themselves. So let's all sell dirt bikes. Let's sell, I use the analogy just because it's so easy of like, let's not try sell our golf balls. Let's try sell golf, because you can't play golf without a golf ball. At some point, if you sell somebody on playing golf, somebody that's never, that doesn't play a lot of golf, and then you hit that person just right and you're like, that guy goes, fuck, I might go play around a golf today. Well, what does he need? He needs some clubs, he needs some shoes, he needs a golf. All the shit that you need to play golf, you'll get. But what you need is you need to initially have the desire to go play golf before you can buy any of those products. So yeah, we're in a time where the products are selling themselves. People are buying exhaust pipes and helmets and shit just because there's not enough stuff to go around right now, so they're sort of buying whatever they want. But that's the chance where we all double down. We put that money into, like you said, great events. You put that money into the people that are doing work to spread the sport into new audiences, so that you create the guy that goes, you know what? Fuck, I'm going to buy a dirt bike. He needs a bike, he needs a helmet, he needs boots, he needs knee pad, all that shit. But it's the selling of the actual riding. You've got to sell the experience. And I think that my personal view is, in a time like this, everybody should think about that particular thing. Don't think about just the products that you sell. Oh, we're selling out of this, or we're kind of sold out of that. Everybody's going to have to buy a helmet at some point. Everybody's going to want to buy an exhaust pipe if they're dirt bike riders. So it's like, let's invest in anything that we can that spreads the, like you said, the drug of motocross.
Yeah. Well, who do you think the best person to spread the word is? Who do you think it is?
I think you can't pinpoint one particular person, right? I think it's everybody. Like, the events, it's the media. I think that there's, the riders that are winning, guys like Axel Hodges that have these weird followings, guys like, the Degans with their channel. Like, there's a lot of outlets that aren't like traditional places that are selling, or like selling the message of dirt bikes, I guess.
Yeah. I always felt like it was, it's the people it's people.
Word of mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, it's like you from the weekend. Like I said, you're frothing. You're going to tell 100 people, right, how good it was, how exciting it was. So it's a bit like when you're selling a product. A lot of people focus on the next customer. The next one, the one that maybe they don't have, and I feel like there's always too much effort put into that.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, because you should actually put your effort into the one that actually bought your product.
Yeah.
Because if you put enough effort into that customer, they're going to tell...
You are right.
100 other people, right?
Yeah, you are right.
Because I see companies all the time, they just so focused on the next customer.
Yeah.
What about the one that you actually
that you've just converted,
believed in your product and put down their money and bought one? What about them?
Yeah.
So because really they're going to be your best disciple. They're the ones that are going to walk around and spread the gospel, and as long as you take care of them a little bit, they're going to be happy. So it's a bit like now, hey, all these people that have bought products, as long as we kind of deliver on our promises to them and make them, I guess, what would you say, exceed their expectations as far as the experiences of motorcycling and the industry and the brands and support. They're going to walk around, tell everyone how great it is, right? They're going to bring even more people in, Sure, at the moment, one of the issues everyone in the industry has is supply. People can't get enough bikes or product, but mark my words, it won't be long before industry makes more products and bikes and things than the market wants, because that's what they always do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't subscribe to Enzo Ferrari's philosophy of making enough less one.
Yeah.
So there's always demand,
Yeah.
And at the moment it's been a unique scenario where there's a lot of demand, and so everyone's margins are pretty strong, and it's a good time, for everyone in the industry all the way through, all the way through to these dealers and so on, some that have struggled immensely. So it's certainly a time where at least everyone can strengthen their balance sheets and put themselves in a good position. But at the same time, you've always got to, you've always got to reinvest, back into what you do, and to make sure that there's something there for tomorrow,
Yeah.
And at the same time, look at the moment when supply is not very good, probably why would they try and attract a whole lot of new customers when it's like this? But I'm pretty confident it won't be long before that changes,
Yeah, and look, I'm not fucking voting for communism. I'm not saying that the companies should give away all their money, but there's definitely I think there is like you said, there's a balance that you've got to kind of strike. And you're right, man. Like, I'd still say to this day in the podcast, like, this is a digital thing. Word of mouth, dude, is the biggest thing. Like, when one of these podcasts does really well, it's because everybody puts it on their story. And everyone's like, listen to this. And it's that old-fashioned word of mouth of just some dude might have 500 followers, but they're 500 real mates, and he puts up like, listen to this podcast with Jeff Leisk. It was so awesome that it's just old school word of mouth.
Totally. I mean, if you go back and I can remember the earlier days of KTM. How would you market something? How would you market a product? I mean, obviously you're just relying completely on word of mouth, and really the only difference with digital, right, is it just kind of spreads it a bit faster and a little bit quicker. It's a bit more like a bushfire, but it's still the same principles. It's still someone telling someone else about something. You know? And so whether that be good or bad, as you know, it works two ways. So that's all it is. It's just word of mouth. And that's the most powerful mechanism. It's the most powerful form of marketing is word of mouth. It's not an advert that you put in a magazine. It's not this or that. It's one person telling another person how good or bad something is. That is really what it is. That's what makes it go around. Yeah,
for sure. So before we get you out of here, tell me about Man Gym Up. Why is it special?
Yeah, it's I think first it's kind of like when you drive into where the track is. I mean, for a start, you're in the southwest region of WA, famous for some of the biggest trees in the world, the big karri trees, and it's tall timber top country. So it's quite a way south, so it's always a little bit chilly there in the morning. So for a start, you kind of get this this atmosphere. It could be a bit foggy, and you get in there and it's in a valley, so with tall timbers, tall trees kind of lining the track, and the track kind of sits in this valley, so it kind of runs up both ends, not massively either way, but really in the center of the valley, it's sandy. But as you go up the hills on both sides, it actually gets quite hard packed, like a gravel or pea gravel. I don't know if and pea gravel's quite unique to WA actually. So, but it's a very fast track as well. So it's really high speed, and the combination of this sort of pea gravel on the hills. Versus the sand and a super sandy section right in sort of the valley of the track. It's just a main track to ride on. Like I said, the speed, the whoops, and it's just its location has a certain atmosphere to it. It's a really pretty location. So,
and so you said before we got on the podcast, best track in Australia.
100%, yeah, for sure, easily.
Really, it's that clear a winner.
I reckon it is. Yeah, it's and it's not because it's a challenging track to ride. It's like I said, the speed there is something you got to contend with. It is pretty quick for a motocross track. But I reckon it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's nothing like it. It's totally unique. The fact that it's in a smaller town, the whole town embraces it, gets behind it. I think this year's going to be massive. Talking to Willie Thompson, promoter, I think he's got around 360 entries or something. So the entry's pretty solid. I think spectator-wise, I think it's going to be pretty big. I think it's going to be a really good year. And he's got some innovations. He's always trying to think out the box. And he's put up a restaurant at the track, and like I said, he's got these big speakers and some good announcers to try and build the atmosphere. And I think we've got this local angle, as you said, with Regan Duffy,
and Kyle,
and Kyle Webster. So taking on the wise men from the east. So the locals are going to get behind those guys like you wouldn't believe. You know what I mean? Like Regan won it a couple of years back, and that was a bit of a shock victory, really. No one thought maybe
16-year-old kid.
Yeah, on the big
450.
bike. On the big bike. So, I think they're going to be pumped, and it's going to easily be the biggest motocross event of the year. Yeah, in Australia for sure.
Yeah, I'm so excited for it, and honestly, I kind of said it before at the start, but I kind of want to go over there and be the outsider. I feel like when I go to any track on the East Coast, and I feel like I'm just feels normal. This to me, this trip to Manjimup, like we're driving 5 days across the desert to get there.
Yep.
Like I'm feeling like I'm gonna go over there and be a real outsider. It's gonna be a humbling experience across the board, from the track to the people to the event itself. Like I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone in a big way and going to the West. I feel like I'm just giving myself to the West and hoping it turns out all right.
The Wild West.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Oh no, it'll be cool. You're gonna love it. I'm gonna cut a few laps on one of my mile bikes, and that's gonna be a lot of fun. I haven't been around that track for a long time, so just to do that and rekindle some memories will be pretty cool. But I'm actually most looking forward to just the event itself. As you could tell before, I'm just such a fan of the sport. I'm pretty passionate about the events, and when I go to a bad event, I get depressed. I kind of like feel, hey, this is our sport. Like you're not treating it with respect. You know what I mean? It could be a lot better than this. And when you get a promoter that really that kind of gets it and is passionate about it and really wants to elevate our sport, that you love, you get pretty pumped up about it, and I'm more excited just to see, hey, this from everything that I've heard about this event and what they're doing behind the scenes to make it, the best motocross event in Australia, possibly, in the world. I'm stoked, man. It's gonna be good. So everyone, get to Manjimup. June
4 to 6, we'll be there. We're doing our Gypsy Tales ride day at Bunbury on the Wednesday before it.
Sandy track, that'll be a good practice. That'll be a good shakedown. That'll get you ready. So
what tyre should I run at Manji?
I think you've got to run something that it's pretty well a sand type tyre really, and you just live with it a little bit on the pea gravel. You know what I mean? It still works okay. So I think and the start's generally a bit sandy. So you want to get a whole shot, right? You want to get out front.
I don't know,
because when you go up those big hills at Manji, you get peppered by those pea gravel stones, and
that's what I've heard is the roost at Manjimup is out of control.
Yeah, it's gnarly. So you want to be in the lead, man. I'm watching you there out front. So
fuck. What are you laughing at?
Take no prisoners, brother. Come on.
Let's go. 350 power. Let's go.
Let's do it, man.
Well, Jeff Leisk, thank you so much. Like I said at the top of the show, bucket list one for me. I'm so glad that I got to hear a lot more about your story and what made the Flying Freckle, and I really appreciate your time, and I'm excited for Manji. I'm excited to see you to ride around there and get that Perth vibe, that WA vibe.
Yeah, it's actually been a while since I've been back to Perth, so like you, I'm looking forward to it, and thanks for having me on the show. I enjoyed it. It's always fun to talk about motorcycles, racing, and go back a few years as far as what I did, and
Perfect. Jeff Leisk, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. And to listen to the full 3-hour podcast, search Gypsy Tales in your favorite podcast platform or click the link in the description below. Gypsy Gang.